It is Super Bowl week. The Giants have won 4 Super Bowls. They also went to a 5th. And in those games, there were so many highlights, they're sometimes difficult to differentiate from. But we're going to try to do that tonight on the Big Blue Breakdown Live as we talk about our votes for the all-time Giants Super Bowl starting lineup coming your way right now. Hello again, everybody. Paul Dottino, so glad to be with you tonight on a very special Super Bowl edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We thought that, with the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday, the Chiefs and the Eagles, yeah, I know, the dreaded Philadelphia Eagles. I get it, right? It's kind of a miserable game. It's hard to really want anybody to win. I'm personally rooting for Steve Spagnuolo. Know him real well, former Giants defensive coordinator. I got to pull for Spags to win another ring. Some of you out there may be rooting for Saquon Barkley and the Eagles. I mean, I get it. Barkley was a great Giant, but I suspect probably not. But in the spirit of the Super Bowl, I thought that this week's show should be really special. We've already been talking about some of the moves the Giants need to make. We've talked about the Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl and the draft and the free agents. But tonight, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl, specifically the Giants Super Bowls. Now, tonight I got 2 very special guests, and I'm going to intro them in just a minute. What we are going to do is pick an all-time Giants Super Bowl starting lineup based strictly on the 5 Super Bowls that the Giants went to. Now, here are the rules before I introduce my guests. Each player selection should be based specifically on the Super Bowl game that the player participated in. Now, there are some guys who played in more than one Super Bowl, and we'll give you some leeway on that, especially if you have a good reason. And so we'll allow a little variance. But for example, if you were to pick Corey Webster at cornerback, he started on the Giants' 2 Super Bowl wins against the Patriots. Well, it's clear that in Super Bowl 42, he had some very important plays at the end, deflecting the ball away from Randy Moss. In 46, not so many spectacular plays, so I would suggest that you probably pick Corey Webster because of Super Bowl 42. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. But if both games are just combined into a meatloaf and make you pick that person, I'm going to give you some leeway and let you do that. And by the way, fans, we're going to give you a chance to chime in on the chat during the course of our voting. And after my guests are done and we've picked the all-time Giants Super Bowl lineup, what I'm then going to do is open up the phones and open up the video calls. We'll say goodbye to our guests. They don't need to hang on the line. And I'll take your video calls and your phone calls if you prefer to go that way, and we can hammer out some of your choices. Maybe you'll agree with some of what we had to say, and maybe you'll just have somebody entirely different. So here's the deal. In order to deal with the multiple schemes that were played in each of the Super Bowls, remember, sometimes it was a 3 wide receiver set. Sometimes it was 2 running backs. Sometimes it was a couple of tight ends. Sometimes it was a 3-4 defense or a 3 safety package. So here's what I decided. I'm going to allow more than the standard 11 players on offense and 11 players on defense. We're going to go with 14 players on each side of the ball, plus 1 kicker, 1 punter, and 1 kick returner. I did not select a coverage guy on kicks. I thought that one might be a little too difficult to truly ascertain. So here are the rules. It's 1 player at each position from the Giants' 5 Super Bowls, 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. All the others are 1 player per position, and I am allowing a fullback, okay? Because you remember, the Giants love to have fullbacks in their Super Bowls. On defense, the variations are going to be as follows. 2 defensive ends, 2 defensive tackles, 2 inside linebackers, and 2 outside linebackers, 3 cornerbacks, and 3 safeties. Okay? That's 14 on offense, 14 on defense. That allows us to consider the different schemes that were played by the different defensive coordinators, Bill Belichick, Perry Fewell, Steve Spagnuolo, John Fox, as well as the offensive coordinators. And so that's how we're going to work this. Yeah, Kevin Gilbride, of course, and Ron Earhart. We love those guys. And Sean Payton. I don't want to cheat those guys. I want to name all the coordinators. Why not? Who participated in the Giants' 5 Super Bowls. So having said that, I'm now going to bring on my very special guests. We have Patricia Traina from the New York Giants Big 50. She wrote a book and is one of the more recent Giants historians to follow the franchise. And Vinny DiTrani was over 30 years a Giants beat writer for the Record in New Jersey. We know him as the Sage. Parcells dubbed him that. I continue to call him that every time we speak. And Vinny has been a 5-time finalist for the media portion of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. These are two people who I have tremendous regard for because they have spent the time and the effort to understand the players we're going to talk about and their places in Giants history. So I thought it only right that these two would come on with me tonight to select the all-time New York Giants Super Bowl starting lineup. Patty, Vinny, thanks for coming on the show tonight. This is going to be fun. I know I asked you to spend some of your free time going through those old notes and those old game books, but I think it's going to be worth it.
Well, I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this, actually.
All right, so here we go. We're going to start, and special teams is probably pretty easy, so I want to get that out of the way first. Patty, you're the lady of the group, so we're going to let you make the first call. Who is the Giants' all-time Super Bowl starting lineup place kicker?
Oh, this one was a tough one for me. I'm going to probably lean towards Matt Barr. And the reason why I'm going to lean towards Matt Barr is I go to Super Bowl 25. And in Super Bowl 25, if you remember, Matt Barr was actually the last person to score in that game. His 21-yard field goal gave the Giants a 20-19 lead. And then, of course, the Bills tried the famous Norwood kick, the Norwide kick, as we call it now. But really, if you look at it, Barr had 2 field goals in that game, 28 yards, and then the 21-yarder, which was in essence the game winner for the Giants. Huge win for the Giants, who were an underdog in that game. So I'm going with Matt Barr.
Did you have any other trepidations there? Was it pretty easy for you?
I thought about going with Lawrence Tynes, but I kept, in keeping with it had to be Super Bowl, because I think of Lawrence Tynes with the overtime kicks in the championship games, and I just, for me, Matt Barr was clutch for the Giants, and at the end of the day, I also considered Raul Allegre from Super Bowl 21, but at the end of the day, I just felt, Matt Barr gave them the lead in Super Bowl 25, and I just felt that was the way to go.
Okay, Vinny, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Patty on this one. The heroics from the place kickers came before the Super Bowl. I mean, you had Barr's kick in San Francisco, put him in the Super Bowl. Tynes' kick in Green Bay, put him in the Super Bowl. So, there wasn't that real spectacular game-winning kick. But like Patty said, I think it was 7 minutes left in Super Bowl 25 when Barr kicked the 21-yarder. That proved to be the winning points. Tynes certainly you have to consider him, but I would also go with Barr.
Yeah, I was also going to go as well with Matt Barr for the same reasons that both of you have already illustrated. Lawrence Tynes, look, clearly, had he missed his field goal in Arizona, early in the game on the Giants' first drive, who knows if the Giants would have wrecked history with the Patriots. So if you'd said to me that Lawrence Tynes deserved consideration, I would not argue that, because obviously every point was necessary in that game for the Giants to win 17-14. But Brad DeLuiso and Jarrett Holmes were the two kickers who were active for Super Bowl 35. Kickers did not make a difference in that game as the Giants were handedly defeated by the Ravens. And Raul Allegre was in a Denver Broncos Super Bowl where the Giants basically rolled in the second half. So all three of us agree on Matt Barr. I see already we do have Eamon Perry on the chat. He's saying he's got Lawrence Tynes, and I think he's the only other guy who deserves consideration here. But right. I agree, and all three of us go Matt Barr. Go ahead, Vinny.
No, I said I think it's between Barr and Tynes, and it's almost a flip a coin. But I think because Barr's 3 points, were the final points of that game, and it wasn't a long field goal, but still he had to make it. And
no doubt. Okay, Vinny, why don't you take us through the punter selection?
Well, I think again, I would go with Sean Landeta. He averaged 46 yards a kick in the 21, and then 43-8 in 25. And he was just a really good punter, and I think in those games, the little field position did mean something, especially the second one, and I think he would be the guy.
Okay, Patty, would you like to chime in on the punter?
Yeah, I'm with Vinny on that. Especially, we watched the Giants in recent years and how they struggled to flip the field to their advantage. You go back to the days of Sean Landeta, and he was just a master of flipping the field for them in those days. So I have no problem with that. I'm with Vinny 100% on this pick.
Did either of the games against Denver or Buffalo stick out for either one of you, or is it just the combination of the two?
I think the first one, he averaged 46 yards a kick. He only had to punt 3 times, but that's a pretty good average for for a punter for a game. So I think that one would be the one. The one would stick out maybe.
All right, yeah, well, guys, on that. I got to go against you here. I'm going Steve Weatherford in Super Bowl 46. He wound up getting 3 punts inside the Patriots' 10-yard line, which is still a Super Bowl record. And his 4th punt, he had one that bounced inside the 10 and went into the end zone for a touchback. But to force Tom Brady and company to have to go 90-plus yards on 3 different occasions, I know Tom Brady was Tom Brady, but I just thought that was a Herculean effort by Weatherford. So I'm going with him for Super Bowl 46.
That's a very valid point there you make. That is very valid. But I'm still going to go with Sean.
Okay, so Patty and Vinny go with Sean Landeta. So 2-1. I am outvoted. So Sean Landeta gets the X over Steve Weatherford. All right. For the kick returner, I'll take the first vote here. And I had to simply go with Ron Dixon. In Super Bowl 35 against the Ravens, with about 3.5 minutes left in the third quarter, he goes 97 yards on a kick return for the Giants' only score of the game. You'll remember they lost 34-7. At that point, it was a 17-7 game. I was sitting just a couple of seats away from Vinny in the press box, and I think he could probably feel my excitement a couple of seats away, as it was the one moment during that game in Tampa that you actually thought the Giants had a breath of oxygen in their lungs. It was short-lived because moments later, Jermaine Lewis took the next kickoff back the other way, and it was 24-7, and the nail was in the Giants' coffin. But I'm going to go Ron Dixon for Super Bowl 35. How about you, Vinny?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the only return touchdown I think the Giants have had in the Super Bowl. And like you say, it was the one moment in that game. It was a pathetic game offensively for the Giants. They got like 140 total yards, something like that. And, like you say, it was the only bright spot, but it didn't stay bright very long. So, but I still would go with Ron Dixon.
Patty?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember Super Bowl 35 pretty well for the wrong reasons, and not just because the Giants lost. I remember I was coming down with the flu to start that, at the start of the flu at that game. So it wasn't a very fun game for me. But yeah, Ron Dixon provided one of the few highlights as far as kick returners go in that game and in that game period. So yeah, I'm going to go with Ron Dixon as well.
All right, so we go with Ron Dixon. He is a unanimous selection, as was Matt Barr, the kicker. All right, so that takes care of the special teams. Sean Landeta did win the vote 2-1 over Steve Weatherford. Okay, so now let's go to defense. And Patty, we're going to go back to you, and we're going to start in the secondary. How about your free safety pick?
Oh, gosh. Ooh. That one was a tough one for me. I'm just trying to think. Let me take my notes because I had Jabril Wilson down, but I don't think he was a free safety. So just hang on a second. Let me just double check my notes.
Jabril was.
He was. Okay.
Yes,
then I'm going to go. Okay. Yeah, I can't even read my own chicken scratch here. I'm going to go with Jabril for the simple reason that I thought, even though it wasn't like an in-your-face type of performance, it was a solid performance, and I believe Steve Spagnuolo spoke about how Jabril played such a solid game, and the little things that he did to help them win in that secondary.
Okay, Vinny, go ahead.
Yeah, I have Jabril as one of my safeties. You have to remember that he helped out on those passes to Moss at the end of the game. Correct. In 42. He got back there also, and he had, I think, 5 tackles in that game. He was one of my safeties, yes.
And I went to Jabril Wilson also. He was my free safety. I don't think there was any doubt. Others who started the Super Bowls, Herb Welsh was in 21, Myron Guyton in 25, Sean Williams in 35, and Antrell Roll started at free safety in 46. 42 was Jabril Wilson. We mentioned him. He gets the unanimous vote. Patty, the strong safety. Who did you have there?
James Butler, hands down. James Butler, another one, very underrated. Quarterback of that defense, or the back end of the defense. I think he was the one making the plays. He got praised as well by Steve Spagnuolo. I'm going with him.
Sage?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Butler had a great game in that 42. He had 11 tackles. And I remember Spags telling me that there was a play down by the goal line where Brady tried to sucker him in and then throw over him in the back of the end zone. And Butler didn't flinch. He stayed there, and Brady had to eat the ball or throw it away. And he was just telling how smart a player James Butler was. And I think, that one game, he really did stand out.
I remember Steve Spagnuolo once told me shortly after that Super Bowl, James Butler graded out the first 100-point grade that he had ever given to a safety.
Yeah.
So it's quite clear for me that James Butler has to get the unanimous selection. He is in there. All right, now, Patty, I know we lost your video. Do we still have you on audio? No, I guess we don't. We must have lost her momentarily. Sage, I'm going to go to you then for the swing safety, the third safety, as we are going to be picking 3 for the purposes of this competition.
I actually have Kenny Phillips from what was it, the 46. He had 6 tackles in that game and a couple of pass defense, and also there was Grant had a pretty good game that game also. But I would go with Kenny Phillips in that game.
Okay, Patty, we'll get right back to you in a second. I'm going to tell you, I've got a second vote for Kenny Phillips and myself. Sage, not only did he have 6 tackles in that game, but he was the guy who got a fingertip on the Tom Brady Hail Mary at the end of the game, right, and was able to knock that ball down in the end zone. So for me, Kenny Phillips has to be one of the 3 safeties on this squad. Patty?
Absolutely. Kenny Phillips, very underrated. It's a shame that, he had the basically a career-ending knee injury, but played a heck of a game. As you said, got the tip on the Tom Brady pass. Definitely Kenny Phillips.
All right, so it's unanimous. Jabril Wilson, James Butler, and Kenny Phillips are three safeties on the all-time Giants starting lineup. The other safeties who started in games, Sam Garnes was the strong safety in 35. Greg Jackson, the strong safety in 25. Kenny Hill, the strong safety in Super Bowl 21. Vinny, I'll let you kick us off with the corners. And again, we'll start with just giving us one. Who would be your first corner?
Well, you know, we already mentioned Corey Webster. And I think, you know, his play with Moss in 42, I think he deserves to be on this list. He was another kind of underrated kind of player. Spags kind of brought him back out of it. He had been buried kind of by the previous coaching staff, and then he came back, and I think he you know, Moss had some catches in that game. He had a touchdown, but you know, this was Randy Moss, and he kept the lid on him. You know, didn't let him control the game, explode the game. So I would go with Corey Webster as one.
I could not agree more. I think Corey Webster, who started both Super Bowl 42 and 46 and was terrific in 42, even though he slipped and fell, remember, in the end zone, allowing Moss to catch the go-ahead touchdown right in front of me, as a matter of fact. But then he came up with the deflections on the Patriots' final drive. So Corey Webster would be my first pick for the corners as well. Patty?
Well, I agree on Corey Webster, but can I give a different name?
No, absolutely, because we're going to have to name two more corners. So please, go right ahead.
Okay.
Corey Webster's unanimous, though, right?
Sure. But can I also suggest Mark Collins?
Yes,
the absolutely. Job he did in Super Bowl 25. I mean, basically that whole playoff run, but I know we're talking just Super Bowl. Mark Collins was a demon. I mean, he was smacking guys around. I think he had, 6 tackles in that game, if I'm not mistaken. He was all over the field, and I felt that he was a big, factor in controlling that K-gun offense of the Bills.
Absolutely. Sage?
Yeah, no, I agree. You know that I thought Mark Collins was the most underrated player I think I ever covered. I mean, I thought this guy was a tremendous corner. He was a good cover corner. He could come up and hit you, and he just never got the ballyhoo that I think he deserved. And again, Reed had some catches on him in that game, but again, he kept them under 10 yards a catch. So he kept them from dominating the game. And Mark Collins has always been one of my favorite players, and I definitely would want him on this list.
He was one of the secrets to stopping that Kelly Red Gun attack. Held Andre Reed to 8 catches for only 62 yards.
Yeah, less 62 yards. I mean, this is a guy who's was a big play receiver, and
by the way,
8 catches.
And Reed had 1 catch of 20 yards.
20 yards.
So that means 7 for 42 on his other catches.
Right. So I mean, he let him catch, but he didn't let him ruin the game, which was part of Belichick's plan was to let Thomas run and stop the passing game. But you needed a guy who can do that, and Collins was the guy.
All right, so we're all unanimous on Corey Webster and Mark Collins. Sage, who's your third corner?
I'm going to go off on a limb a little bit here, based on one play in Super Bowl 42. Late in the game, Thurman Thomas from the Bills 19-yard line, their last drive, breaks free.
You mean 25?
25, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and you and I are going to pick the same guy because you're already hinting that the play is the most critical play of that game.
He breaks free. He's on his way. He could have gone all the way, maybe, or he definitely would have been deep into Giant territory, which even if they didn't score, it would have made an easier field goal for Norwood. And Everson Walls, who was who's known as a ball hawk covered corner, comes up and grabs him around the ankles and brings him down. He's the last guy. Now, somebody may have gotten him on an angle later down the field, but he would have gone at least another 20, 30 yards before anyone got him. And based on that one play, which I think is one of the two, I think, most underrated plays in Giant Super Bowl history,
Yes.
I got to go with Everson.
I could not agree with you more, Sage. I've talked to Everson about that play so many times, and he loves the fact that he was not known as a reputed tackler, and
No,
yet
he wasn't.
he made the most important tackle in that game.
Against the Hall of Fame running back.
Yes, and it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
He doesn't stop Thurman Thomas. I know most people that I've talked to over the years thought he was gone, and I don't know if you can see that on NFL Films copy or the TV copy, but Sage, we were in the press box. We saw nobody on that sideline between the numbers and it might have been the sideline.
Yeah, I mean, he may have gone all the way, or at least would have gotten really deep into Giant territory and made the Norwood kick very simple. So I just based on that play,
absolutely,
I got to go with Everson Walsh.
20-19. It was 1:48 left in the game. 3rd and 1 for the Bills at their own 19-yard line. Thomas is stopped after a 22-yard
22 yards, yeah.
Courtesy.
But it could have been 42-52. Yes.
Patty, I'm sure you're going to agree on this one.
Absolutely. No question.
And by the way, how about this? And I mentioned today on the Big Blue Kickoff live show earlier this afternoon, I've known about this for a long time. The official NFL game book lists that tackle as Carl Banks. Banks was 58. Walls was 28.
No.
And the spotter has the game book wrong. The official record of that Super Bowl, the NFL's official record and game book, has credited Carl Banks with that tackle all of these years, and it's wrong. I need to get a hold of somebody in the NFL or at Elias and have them change that.
Well, I mean, you just look at the tape, you can see it's Everson. And
absolutely.
And it was a classic tackle for a guy who wasn't really a tackler. So
without question. So Collins, Walls, and Webster, all unanimous selections by our panel. So we've got quite a few already. There's only one so far that we did not have unanimous selection on. All right, so now we're going to go to the linebackers, and I'm going to start with the inside linebackers, and I'm going to go with Chase Blackburn, who in Super Bowl 46, with I guess it was 2 plays into the fourth quarter, he intercepts a pass down at the Giants' 8-yard line. Tom Brady heaves one about 50 yards downfield to one Gronkowski, the Gronk, who was kind of limping on a bad ankle. And somehow there's Blackburn 50 yards downfield making a pick at a time when the Giants were down 17-15. If the Patriots get a field goal there, now the Giants are down by a touchdown. They need a touchdown. And if they get a touchdown, now the Giants are down by 2 scores. And it's already early in the fourth quarter. I got to go Chase Blackburn as my first inside linebacker. Vinny?
That's a good pick. That's a good pick. But I think in that game, Michael Boley had a tremendous game in that game also.
He did.
He had 10 tackles, and he was all over the field. And
now I considered Boley an outside linebacker for the purposes of this competition.
All right. Well then, okay. Well then, all right.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. Okay. I'll go with Blackburn then as one of my 2.
Okay, Patty.
Harry Carson. Come on. 7 tackles in Super Bowl. What was it? The Broncos Super Bowl 21.
Okay.
Defensive leader, one of the heart and soul. How do we not include Harry on this list?
Well, how do you know that we're not picking Harry with our other picks?
I don't, but I mean, you guys both Chase Blackburn, so I figured I'd throw a different name out.
All right. Well, we got 2 Blackburns, and we have a Harry Carson. My other inside linebacker, I'm going with Antonio Pierce. In Super Bowl 42, he had 10 tackles. He was the heart and soul and the brains of the Spags defense that knocked off the undefeated Patriots. My 2 inside linebackers, believe it or not, Patty, and it hurts me not to pick Harry Carson, I'm going Chase Blackburn and Antonio Pierce. Vinny?
Yeah, I mean, I always have a deep spot in my heart for Harry Carson.
So do I.
Having represented him at the Hall of Fame, and also, just knowing the guy, what a great guy he is. But I kind of think that Pierce may get that second nod because, I mean, he's done 11 tackles on that game, and like you said, he was a real source of leadership and whatever in the defense in that game. So I would kind of go with Pierce, and I'm sorry, Harry, but Harry, can we make Harry like the third linebacker?
He's got to be on the list. Come on.
There's only two inside linebackers. That's the rule.
Ah,
I'll tell you
I
what,
love you,
though.
Harry, if you're watching.
Harry will always be captain for life. And that's true with the real organization. He could be captain of this squad as well.
That's
and by
right.
the way, no disrespect to Pierce. I love Pierce too, and I agree with you about him. But I think you got to include Harry on this because you think of that goal line stand or that defensive series.
That's
against
true.
The
That was Harry, that goal line stand.
Yep.
I'm changing my vote.
Well, hold on. Before you do that, Sage, the goal line stand inside the Giants' 5-yard line in the second quarter of Super Bowl 21 against Denver, each of the Giants' superstar linebackers made a stop.
Yeah.
LT had one, Carson had one, Banks had one. So do you want to give that whole stop to Harry? He had one of the three.
Yeah, but if he doesn't make that stop, they
score. That's right.
All right. So we got 2 votes for Harry Carson. We do have 3 votes for Chase or 2 votes for Blackburn.
Yeah. Wait, can I change my Blackburn vote to Pierce?
Okay, so you want to go Carson, Pierce.
Yeah.
Patty, where are your 2?
I would go Carson and Pierce. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so Carson and Pierce. Pierce gets the unanimous 3 votes. Harry gets 2 votes over Chase Blackburn's 1. Boy, I feel really bad for Chase. Middle linebacker going 50 yards
and he
downfield.
came off the couch too, if you remember, for that game. Remember, he was teaching on the couch.
Football. Yeah. All right, you guys did want to go with Chase. I get it. I love Harry too. But all right, so Harry Carson and Antonio Pierce get the inside linebacker spot. Outside linebacker, I'm going to start with Carl Banks, and there's just no way for me not to start with Carl. Many people believe that had he not had Phil Simms not had the phenomenal Super Bowl that he had against Denver, Banks was the defensive MVP in that game. Also played extremely well against the Bills in Super Bowl 25. I start with Carl Banks as one of my outside linebackers. You can pick a total of 2. He's my first one. Patty?
I think you got to go Banks and LT. I mean, there's, come on. I mean, Banks should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know why he's not. LT is definitely in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he changed the way the game was played, and he was just unstoppable. So, I mean, you've got to go with those 2, I think.
Vinny?
Oh, yeah. No, Banks definitely is one of my 2. The second one, I agree with Patty that LT just being on the field made a difference in any game he played. So, I would have to go with him also. But there are other guys, like I said, Boley, because I thought you were going to use him as an inside guy. He had a terrific game. And there's another guy who, doesn't get any mention, but he was a really important force in that the Super Bowl 42. Kavika Mitchell. Remember him down the stretch? He played really well. And he played well in that Super Bowl, too. I mean, you can't mention him. You don't mention Kavika Mitchell with Banks and Taylor. But, I think he deserves at least a mention here for his play. But I would have to go with Banks and Taylor.
Yeah, I will tell both of you that Kavika Mitchell, to me, was definitely somebody I thought about. And, Vinny, you mentioned Michael Boley before. I mean, I could not leave Lawrence Taylor off. He was part of the goal line stand that both of you referred to in Super Bowl
But
21.
just his presence, his presence just changed everything that other teams
No
would do.
question. No question. The greatest defensive player who has ever walked the face of the earth. There's no way I cannot vote for Lawrence Taylor.
Yep.
But Michael Boley's 10 tackles and a pass defense in Super Bowl 46 certainly made me flinch for a bit.
Yeah,
honorable mention. He gets an honorable mention for sure.
Yeah.
Well, honorable mention doesn't get you into the starting lineup. All right, Sage, we're going to go to the defensive line. Why don't you lead us off at defensive end?
All right. Well, we're talking about 35, where there wasn't very much to talk about. But Michael Strahan had a very good game in Super Bowl 35. We think more of him in 42, but in 35, he was like one of the real guys who stood out a little bit for them. So, I mean, I would go with Strahan as one of my ends.
Patty?
I got to go with Strahan too, for sure. I mean, there's no way you can leave him off this list, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
He had a sack and a half in that game. You remember the Ravens, they scored one touchdown was on a interception and one was on a kickoff return. So that was 20 points the offense scored. So the defense played pretty well that day. It gets overshadowed by how bad the offense was. But I mean, Strahan did have a really good game that game.
Oh, there's no question. In fact, Sage, what a lot of people don't realize, and I checked the numbers on this, the Baltimore Ravens offensively had less than 250 yards on the day.
Yeah, 240 yards, something like that.
Yeah, and they were roughly, I think they were 4 for like 16 on third down conversions. The Giants defense actually played well in that game.
Yeah,
but it was the turnovers and the fact that the offense was so inept that made it a 34-7 score.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. 2 touchdowns on returns, and and the offense, the defense. Yeah, I think the Ravens had 244 yards, something like that, total offense.
Correct. But see, I also picked Michael Strahan for a different reason. Yes, he did well in the Ravens game, but I also look at what he did in Super Bowl 42. 17-14, fellas. 1 TD and we are world champions. Believe it, it will happen.
I understand. I mean, that I said people think of him at 42, but I think 35 he may have had a better game.
Yeah, we had a sack on Brady too, though, in Arizona. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're all in on Strahan. So he absolutely gets our first vote. And who is our second defensive end? Vote. Please, Sage, go right ahead.
I'm going to go with Leonard Marshall. He had a couple of sacks in that game against the Broncos. I think he had a really solid game. I would have to go with him.
Patty?
I agree. I like Leonard was it's interesting. Leonard always felt for a long time that he never got the respect he deserved, but I want to give him his props here. I think Leonard Marshall was if you didn't have a Lawrence Taylor and a Carl Banks and a Harry Carson behind him, Leonard Marshall probably would have been the star of that defense, undisputed. But he did his share, and for sure, he was instrumental in that big goal line stand in 21. And I definitely think he deserves to be a spot on this team.
Now, I kind of went with my heart, guys. And so bear with me a second here. Sage knows. He's smiling already. He knows. I went with my heart. My second defensive end was George Martin. Super Bowl 21, George Martin with about 2.5 minutes left in the first half. Giants are down 10-7, and John Elway's backed up deep in his own territory. And George Martin comes up with a huge sack of Elway in the end zone for a safety.
Safety, right.
And the Giants go into the locker room 10-9, and Parcells tells his team, we haven't done our best yet, and they've given us everything they got, and it's only 10-9. We're going to go out there and kick their butts. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. I'm sure Bill had much more colorful language than I'm using on this program.
I saw halftime of that game. I saw George Young in the press box, and I said to him, George, you're winning this game 9-10. And he kind of laughed and said, we both knew that it was inevitable that the Giants were going to take over in the second half. And George's sack, I have all the respect in the world for George. I mean, honorable mention, okay, Patty?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
All
And I
right.
love
So,
George too. George is an absolute gentleman, great storyteller. He was one of the captains, one of Parcells' lieutenants. Absolutely, I have no problem with him being on that list.
all right. Well, in any event, Leonard Marshall gets the vote 2-1. Michael Strahan gets unanimous 3 votes. And so other defensive ends who were considered: Jason Pierre-Paul, O.C. Umanura, Cedric Jones, Eric Dorsey, and of course Justin Tuck. But his name is going to come up. I'm telling you right now, his name is going to come up at the defensive tackle spot because of that NASCAR package. So, Sage, I'm gonna let you pick the defensive tackle spot, but I'm just telling you, I'm not moving off George Martin at defensive end. One of my all-time favorite players, and a guy who was so deserving of getting that safety and a Super Bowl ring after living through part of what was the darkest era of Giants football.
Yeah. Okay. Tackle, Justin Tuck. I mean, you can't. I mean, let's face it. I mean, his play in 42 was, incredible. I mean, and he didn't even start that game. I mean, he wasn't really he's not listed in the starting lineup in that game, but he came in and, he just tore it up. He had, what was it? How many tackles? He had 6 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. He was definitely the defensive MVP of that game. So he's got to be one of the tackles.
And then in Super Bowl 46, he forced the safety when Brady threw the ball away from out of his own end zone. So you got to put Tuck on the defensive line, right, Patty?
Oh yeah.
I think. Oh, absolutely. I would. Most of his sacks, if I'm not mistaken, came from the defensive tackle spot. So, absolutely.
Okay, Sage, who's your other defensive lineman? Your defensive tackle here.
That's a pretty tough one, but Eric Howard had a good game in 25, and I'm going to go with him. He had 5 tackles in that game. And remember, and they wanted Buffalo to run the ball in that game, and and he had to be one of the guys that made sure that Thurman Thomas didn't run for 250 yards. So I would go with Eric Howard.
I remember in that game, Sage, Eric Howard and Leonard Marshall practically played the whole game as the only 2 down linemen.
That's right. Belichick started two defensive linemen because
Belichick decided he wanted to go extra linebackers.
Right. He wanted to keep the passing game from beating them, and it was a tough game for Eric Howard. He had to play almost the whole game, and against a team that was running the ball. So, and he stood up. I'm going to go with him.
I got Eric Howard as well. That was easy for me, Patty.
Let's make it a sweep.
All right. Well, that's really easy. We got a bunch of sweeps here. So Eric Howard and Justin Tuck are the 2 defensive tackles. Michael Strahan and Leonard Marshall are the defensive ends. Other defensive tackles that would have been considered: Jim Burt, obviously, Cornelius Griffin, Keith Hamilton, Freddie Robbins, Linval Joseph, Chris Canty, Barry Cofield. All defensive tackles who did good things for the Giants in their Super Bowls, but nobody could beat these other 2 guys out as far as our 3-man panel, 2 men and 1 woman panel. Sorry, Patty.
That's okay. All good.
3-person.
Right. There we go. All right. So that takes care of our entire defensive side and special teams. I should have mentioned other defensive backs, the corners that I did not mention earlier. Perry Williams, Emmanuel McDaniel, Sam Madison, Prince Amukamara. All guys who played significant roles as the 3rd corner in those Super Bowls, but they did not get mentioned. Other corners who started games: Elvis Patterson, Dave Thomas, Aaron Ross. They just didn't make our list. Linebackers: Pepper Johnson, Steve Diassi, Mike Barrow. They didn't get onto the list either. And I think that's everybody. on defense and special teams. We've made our choices. They're over there in the chat, folks. If you're coming on late, go over to the chat. I have listed position by position the people we took on special teams and defense. Panel, I know we're going a little slower here. I'm going to try to speed it up just a bit because I don't want to keep you all night. But we do have to go through the offense now, and I got a hunch we're going to have some challenges here on offense. So let's start with the offensive line. Patty, left tackle. Who do you have?
Jumbo Elliott. Guy was a human brick wall.
And you like him for, obviously, Super Bowl 25 against Buffalo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll go second and say I'm going Brad Benson. Super Bowl 21 against Denver. He went up against Rulon Jones, who was an all-pro and had 13 and a half sacks. And Benson kept Phil Simms clean to where Phil had the most efficient Super Bowl game in history. So I got to go Brad Benson.
I got to go Jumbo. I mean, you talk about who he was up against. He was up against Bruce Smith. And yep. He had one sack, the one in the safety on Hostetler, who I still don't know how he held on to the ball on that play. But other than that, he did nothing. And Jumbo just neutralized him completely. Benson is a good second choice. And remember, David Deal played left tackle in 2 Super Bowls. So, but I would have to go with Jumbo because of what he did with Bruce Smith.
Okay, Deal with the 2 Super Bowls. Lomas Brown was the starting left tackle against the Ravens in Super Bowl 35. Yeah, my issue with Jumbo was there was that safety. And, if Haas doesn't hold on to that ball, it's not a safety, it's a touchdown. Well, and yeah. I know, look, I've talked to Jumbo about the play. He still says the bottom line is Otis Anderson was supposed to pick up the block and chip, and he didn't. And in fact, he actually tripped Hostetler. But I'm going Brad Benson, but I lose. Jumbo Elliott wins that vote 2-1. Patty, who's the right tackle?
The right tackle. Oh, gosh. I think I'm going to go with Kareem McKenzie. When Kareem McKenzie was in his prime, that man was a mauler. He was just tremendous. Pass blocking, run blocking. Kareem McKenzie kind of did it all for them.
Super Bowls 42 and 46. Sage, what do you think?
Yeah, I got to give Kareem the vote also because, I know we said we're supposed to go for one game, but he was a steady, stalwart right tackle in 2 Super Bowls. I mean, we had Carl Nelson was an excellent player also, and so was Riesenberg. But I think McKenzie, because, again, you wanted to live limited to one. And, I would say 42, Kareem McKenzie is my right tackle.
Yeah, in 42, he did not allow a sack. In 46, he allowed 1 sack. So that's only 1 sack allowed in 2 Super Bowl starts. Nelson started 21, Riesenberg started 25, and Luke Pettigrew was the starting right tackle in Super Bowl 35 against Baltimore. Okay, let's go to the guards. Patty, left guard. Who do you have?
I'm probably going to be outvoted on this one, but I'm kind of leaning towards Kevin Booth.
How about that? A guy who came off the bench
and
started at center for David Boss for much of the second half of the year. And then when Boss came back from the concussion, Booth went to left guard.
Yeah, I mean, just the versatility, and he was one of the smartest, most cerebral offensive linemen they had that year. I mean, mad respect for Kevin Booth.
Vinny?
Yeah, that's an interesting pick. I mean, there you think is William Roberts and Soybert and Billy Ard. I mean, those are 3 pretty good players. I have to go with Roberts because of the running game in 25. That was a big part of them winning the game, and I think he and Jumbo on that side in that game made a big difference.
He would have been my second pick, by the way.
Well, but we can't pick two left guards. There's
No,
only one left
I know,
guard,
but I'm
Patty.
just saying that it was for me. It was either him or Roberts, and I don't know. Booth was so underrated, and I tend to favor the underdogs. So
Well, this is really difficult because it's the first time we've gone with three different guys. Because I'm going with Richie Seubert,
Sorry,
who
but
was the starting left guard in Super Bowl 42. And what a lot of people don't know is that Richie had sprained his MCL in the game against the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. And I remember talking to Richie after the game, and he was hurting bad. Now, earlier in the year, as you remember, Sean O'Hara had had a sprained MCL, and it wasn't really good. It just hampered him significantly. And Richie said to me, "Nothing is keeping me out of the Super Bowl. I don't care what I have to do." And he basically played on one leg in Arizona in Super Bowl 42 against the New England Patriots. And I cannot ignore that. So Richie Seubert is my guy. So Sage, you went for William Roberts. Patty, you went for Kevin Booth, and I went for Richie Seubert. So that's going to have to be decided by the fans. Hopefully, the fans out there hit me up on the chat or maybe a phone call later. We need a Giant starting left guard for the all-time Giants Super Bowl team. The choices are Ard, Roberts, Parker, Seibert, and Booth. We voted for Roberts, Seibert, and Booth. We need someone to break the tie, so the fans hopefully will be able to do it. Christine's already said Seibert. Webb says Seibert. We will see if that can keep it up, and maybe Richie will get onto the team. Patty, who do you vote for the center?
oh, this was a tough one for me because obviously it comes down to Bart Oates or Sean O'Hara. I like them both. I think, though, I'm going to give the nod to O'Hara. I'm going to give the
Okay, for
nod to
Super Bowl
O'Hara.
42. Sage?
Bart Oates. Bart Oates was part of the Super Bowl 21 offensive line. Parcells called them the
lunch pail guys? The
no, they were the suburbanites. They were technique oriented, smart, kind of offensive line. Oates was the center. Then in 25, he was part of the line with Roberts and Elliott and Riesenberg and Cratch, Maulers. So he played. He went from playing with a cerebral offensive line to a physical offensive line in that period. And so I got to go with Oates. I mean, he's the only one who carried over from the two lines.
Yeah, and I'm totally on board with Bart Oates on this one also, Sage. I can't forget, the 9.5-minute touchdown drive in the third quarter, which was the longest possession in Super Bowl history, when the Giants just bulldozed their way down the field, and Oates was the leader of that line.
Yeah, well, but I'd say he played on both, in both situations, the finesse line and the power line, and and did a good job both times. So I got to go with him. O'Hara is a good pick also, but I got to go with Bart.
So Oates beats out O'Hara 2-1. Dusty Ziegler obviously played against the Ravens in 35. David Boss was the starting center in Super Bowl 46. So we're going to go, the panel selects Bart Oates at center. So our problem so far is at left guard. I see Scott Young has chimed in, and he says Roberts. Elo H says William Roberts. So Roberts and Richie Seibert each got 2 votes from the chat room. So we still have not been able to break that tie. We're going to keep that chat room open and see what happens there. We now have to go to right guard. And Patty, we need a selection from you here. And I think this one's a little easier.
Come on, man. Chris Snee. No. I mean, is there any debate here?
No, I think this was one of the easy ones. I'll go next on this one, Sage. Snee not only was the starter in 42 and 46, it was Jacobs who ran behind Snee on the fourth down on the game-winning touchdown drive in Arizona that beat the Patriots and the undefeated season. If you remember, Richie Seibert pulled from left guard. Jacobs tripped over his ankle and was behind Snee and fell forward for the first down. Snee doesn't make that block properly. Maybe that play never happens, but that's just simply one play in the trenches that makes me want to vote for Chris Snee as well. Do you have a different choice?
No, Chris Snee, definitely. I mean, this was one of the no-brainers, I think. Guy who was steady, two Super Bowls, steady, and a very good player, and no question about Chris Snee.
All right, so Snee gets the unanimous vote. I knew it would go that way. Other starting left guards for the Giants, right guards in the Super Bowls: Chris Godfrey in 21, Eric Moore in 25. Obviously, Bob Crouch came in the second half when Eric Moore was busy throwing up at halftime. And Ron Stone started Super Bowl 35 against the Baltimore Ravens. All right, I'm allowing two tight ends because there have been some scheme alterations over the years. So we're going to go with two tight ends. To no one's surprise, my first tight end is going to be Mark Bavaro. There's no way in the world I'm not picking Mark Bavaro. There are a lot of tight ends here to choose from. But, Bavaro caught the 13-yard touchdown pass early in the third quarter that put the Giants ahead of Denver 16-10 as they then started to romp during the entire second half and rolled past the Broncos for the Giants' first ever Super Bowl championship. Vinny, why don't you go next? And I'm going to guess you're going to go with Bavaro as well.
Yeah, you caught the touchdown, and you also deflected the touchdown to McConkey. So,
yeah.
So he was involved kind of in two touchdowns. Definitely Bavaro. Just an all around terrific tight end, and he had a good game against Denver.
Patty?
Bavaro, you have to put him on the team. Absolutely.
You know the toughest part about Bavaro? He was a Hall of Fame caliber player who, because of injuries, was unable to do the type of longevity that would have made him a Hall of Famer. Because for the short time that he was with the Giants, Sage, I think, and Patty, I'm sure you would agree, he was as good as anybody in the league, and he could do it all.
You just remember that play in San Francisco where he carried half the defense for 10 yards. I mean, that just showed what kind of player he was.
So Bavaro gets one vote at tight end, and the other vote was really hard for me. It really, really was. But I'm going to go Kevin Boss in Super Bowl 42 in Arizona. Early in the fourth quarter, 10-7 ball game, Boss catches a 45-yarder. And it was the one huge, big chunk yardage play of that game when the Giants knocked off and upset the undefeated Patriots. I went with Kevin Boss. It's probably unfair because I know the kind of job that Howard Cross did in Super Bowl 25, helping to block in a two tight end set. I understand that. Cross also played against Baltimore in two Super Bowls for the Giants. But I went with Kevin Boss. Vinny?
I like, I see what you're saying about Boss, but I had to go with Cross because, he was on the field a lot in that 25, and he caught a couple of passes, including a couple of key passes. And we all know what kind of blocker he was. So I would have to go with Howard Cross.
And again, I absolutely understand. I really grinded my teeth on this one. Patty,
yeah,
it looks like
it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah,
Patty, you have the deciding vote.
Yeah, this is a tough one. And just real quick, I remember talking to Kevin Boss before the big game, and he was nervous about it. And I said to him, Kevin, you're going to make a big play in this game. I said, don't ask me how I know, but I just have that feeling. And I remember after the game, when he came to the tent area, to the podiums, he saw me and he came up and he gave me a big hug. He still had his uniform on. He was all sweaty and dirty. And he goes, Pat, you were so right. You were so right. So he's got me in a bear hug. But you know what? I got to go with Howard Cross. Not much of a receiver, but he, when it was clutch, he came through, and a blocker like nobody's business. I mean, that man could block like anything. So yeah, I got to go with Howard on this one.
Okay, so Boss gets outvoted 2-1. Other tight ends who got a lot of playing time for the Giants in the Super Bowls: Pete Mitchell in Super Bowl 35, Michael Matthews in Super Bowl 42. People don't remember him. He was a blocker. Wasn't much in the passing game, but he was a blocker. And then Super Bowl 46, Bear Pasco and Jake Ballard. Yeah,
they were, they both played pretty good roles in that game, but
they did.
Yeah.
Ballard actually tore. I believe Ballard tore his ACL in that game as well.
Right. Yeah, I think he would have been a good player if he'd stayed healthy.
No doubt. No doubt. All right, so the selections go Mark Bavaro and Howard Cross. All right, we go to wide receiver. Sage, I don't know. Is it time for you to go first, I believe, here? And we're going to give you the first. Go ahead.
All right. Well, you got to go with Tyree. I mean, not the helmet catch with notwithstanding, he also caught a touchdown in that game. And let's face it, when people think of big plays in the Super Bowl, everyone comes to that one. And here's a guy who was like really unheralded and wasn't like the fifth wide receiver. He practiced the day before. He couldn't catch a cold, and here he comes in and makes this catch. The fact that the ball never hit the ground as it was going back, to me, is still remarkable. So I got to go Tyree as one of them.
It's impossible not to pick David Tyree. Also had the early fourth quarter touchdown. So between the helmet catch and the touchdown catch earlier in the game, how could anybody not pick David Tyree, the greatest play maybe in Super Bowl history? Patty, you want to make this a three-way vote on David?
Yeah, I'm fine with David Tyree. Quite honestly, there's a bunch of guys you could pick for this, but I totally agree he has to be on there. And if I could throw out another name, you got to go with Plaxico. Plaxico played 42. If you remember, he had that injury where he slipped in the shower and there was some doubt as to whether or not he'd be able to play. And he catches the winning touchdown. So, I mean, I think you got to put Plaxico on the list too.
All right, so we'll go out of turn here. So we all agree on Tyree. He's a unanimous 3-vote receiver. You're going to use Plaxico Burress as your second receiver vote. Who is your third receiver vote, Patty? We are allowing 3.
Oh, wow. Gosh, there's so many to choose from. Toomer, there's Hakeem Nicks. You could go with Victor Cruz. Mario Manningham, if you want to talk about good plays, remember Mario Manningham, throw it to Manningham, make him throw it to Manningham, and he caught that tightrope, along the sideline, so you could put him in there. I guess I'm going to go with, oh man, this is tough. Geez. I wish I could pick all 3 of them because they all have merit, I think. I guess I'll go with Hakeem Nicks. I mean, again, you can go with Cruz. You can go with, Manningham. I'll go with Hakeem because I have a feeling nobody else is going to go with him.
All right, Sage. So we got your Tyree vote. Patty's going to back that up with Burress and Nicks. You get 2 more receiver picks. Where are you going to go?
Well, I got to go with Mark Ingram. I mean, you remember that play and that drive, the drive that took up, half a century, and the play he made where, he was, I still don't know how he got free and got the first down and kept the drive alive. And he had 5 catches for 74 yards in that game. So I got to go with Ingram as my second guy. Third guy is
converted the 3rd and 13
by the 14 yards.
Like 3 guys miss.
Right.
Converts the first down, and then the Giants wind up going in for a score, which they desperately needed.
Yeah, he got 14 yards on 13 when he should have had probably about 6. And and on his own, he got the last 8 or so, and got the first down. And he had 5 catches in that game too. So he's my 2. 3 is really hard. I mean, we got Manningham with that catch where, again, how did he keep his feet in? You got Toomer had a good game in
Baker.
42.
Baker.
Yeah. Then you had McConkey had a nice game in 21. He had caught the flea flicker and then caught a touchdown. And my second most overlooked play in Giant Super Bowl history was Steve Smith on the in the final drive was I forgot what it was, third and 11, I think. And he catches a pass on the sideline. Now he's a rookie, hadn't played much all year. Just got into the rotation. He's by the sideline. The clock is running. If he catches the ball, goes out of bounds, it's 4th and 2. He had enough sense to get up ahead of the marker and then go out of bounds. Gave him the first down. And Eli then had 4 shots really to throw in the end zone. He only need 1. But I can consider all of those guys. But if I had the gun to my head, I'd probably go with Akeem Nicks in his 100-yard game.
Oh, wow. So you surprised me there, Sage. After you went through all those candidates, you wound up picking Hakeem.
Well, like I said, I could pick any one of those guys. Burris, Smith, Toomer, Manningham.
This was one of the hardest positions I thought in the whole ballot because and you mentioned Stephen Baker catching that diving touchdown where he stretches out right before the end of the first half against Buffalo.
A lot of wide receivers for a team that's not noted for having the wide receivers. They had a lot of receivers make big plays in Super Bowls.
Yes, exactly. And the problem here is the big play and the value of the key play as opposed to the overall stats at the end of the game.
Right.
That's the problem with this particular position.
Right.
Because if you go to the value of the play, you got to pick David Tyree, obviously, and you also have to pick Mario Manningham because of the tiptoe down the left sideline, 3.5 minutes left to go in the game against the Pats in 46, 17-15. Giants need a field goal to take the lead, and on 1st and 10 from the 12, Eli goes down the left sideline for a 38-yard completion to Manningham, who later in that drive catches a 16-yarder and a 2-yarder. He caught 3 passes on that game-winning drive.
Yeah. Can I change my vote?
Go ahead.
Can I change my last vote?
Okay, what do you want to do?
Manningham.
Okay.
I still don't know how he stayed in bounds on that catch. I mean, it was really remarkable. And like you said, Belichick said, "Let Manningham beat you," and he did. So,
this was a tough one. A lot of guys that you could pick this one.
Yeah, I hate to wobble like this, but you make a good case for Manningham. I think I'm going to change to Manningham because of, like you say, there were so many big plays made by wide receivers in Giant Super Bowls. So,
well, on that winning drive, Sage, it's not that hard to make a case for him because he catches 3 passes for 56 yards on the game-winning drive.
Just that one catch alone was worth the price of admission there.
His third and final to the drive brought the Giants to the 34, which got them into field goal range anyway. So
I'm going to go Tyree, Ingram, Manningham.
Tyree, Ingram, and Manningham.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sage, that's exactly who I picked. Tyree, Ingram, and Manningham.
Can I change my vote again then?
For all the reasons we just discussed, and it was very hard not to pick Stephen Baker because without his touchdown at the end of the second quarter against the Bills, I don't know if the Giants are able to come back and win that game. It's very hard not to pick Plexico Burris, who does have one-on-one coverage with Ellis Hobbs and beats him in the end zone on a bad knee and a bad ankle and catches the winning touchdown pass to ruin the undefeated Patriots in Super Bowl 42. It's hard not to pick that one. I know, Patty, that's where you went. 13-yard completion with 39 seconds to go for the win. And it's very hard not to go to Akeem Nicks, who had the most productive Super Bowl of any wide receiver in Giants history, 10 catches for 109 yards, 8 first downs and converted 3 third down opportunities. Easily most productive receiver ever
yeah.
in
No,
Giants Super Bowl history.
This was a tough one.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to just to get through that group. I mean, you could pick any one of those of the guys you mentioned. So,
no question. All right, but the winners, Nix and Burris, get left to the side on this one, Patty. You were the lone wolf on Nix and Burris.
Somebody's got to be different, I guess.
We are going with Manningham, Ingram, and of course David Tyree. Other receivers, we mentioned a bunch. Guys who also played a receiver for the Giants in the Super Bowl, Lionel Manuel and Stacy Robinson were in the game against Denver in Super Bowl 21. Stacy Robinson was also in 25 against Buffalo. Toomer was in 35 and 42. Cruz obviously played in 46. And then Ike Hilliard was in Super Bowl 35. So was Ron Dixon. We mentioned Steve Smith in 42. And so that pretty much gives you the list of guys who we had to consider. And more than half of those guys were all very, very warranting of a vote. But we have finally decided it's going to be Tyree along with Ingram and Manningham. All right. So now we go to the running backs. We're going to allow you to pick. Let's go fullback first. And I know where Sage is going because he and I have a soft spot for this guy. So, Sage, I'm just going to let you fire away on the one fullback that we're going to pick here.
well, I kind of like this guy because one day I was covering the Generals, the New Jersey Generals, and I went up afterwards. I went into Parcells' office, and Parcells says to me, "They got any players on that team?" I said, "Well, yeah, there's this running back Walker. You may have heard of him. Is anybody beside him?" I said, "Yeah, there's this fullback. He's kind of raw, but he's a big kid. He's tough, and I think he's kind of player you kind of like, Maurice Carthon." You go, "Okay, well," but and then eventually the Giants, of course, signed him, and I'm not saying because I told him, but Mo always used to think that I was the guy who got him on the Giants. But Carthon was the best blocking fullback I ever saw. I mean, I don't think there's any question. He and Moose Johnson was probably the best of all. But Carthon was just tremendous. I mean, you see Morris running a sweep to the right, and you'd see a bunch of defensive players, and all of a sudden you'd see one go down like he was chopped down by a tree, and you knew Carthon got that guy. And so I mean, there's no question to me Carthon is the fullback.
Well, considering that he was the starter against Denver and against Buffalo in the Giants' first 2 Super Bowl wins, he blocked for Joe Morris, he blocked for Otis Anderson. The man was a horse, and people don't even remember the fact that he ran for over 1,000 yards one year with the Generals, Vinny.
With the Generals, right? Yeah. I mean, he was. I mean, because a lot of guys were looking for Herschel, but yeah, and Parcells said no, he's going to be my blocker, and I'll throw him a pass once in a while, I'll give him a handoff once in a while, but he's going to be my blocker, and he was terrific, great.
All right, Patty, do you want to give love to either Greg Comella, Madison Hedgecock, or Henry Hynoski?
I got to go with Mo Carthon, man. I'm with you on this, but if I had to pick a 2, or actually if I had to pick a 1B and then a 2, I would probably go Hedgecock would be my 1B. Comella would be very close to Hedgecock, and then I would go Hynoski.
Wow, you would go Comella ahead of Hynoski on your depth chart, huh? That surprises me.
So. I think so.
Comella was a good pass catcher out of the backfield.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I thought he was a little bit more versatile, but, Hedgecock, and I know how you felt about Hedgecock, he was pretty good. I mean, he wasn't quite in the same category as a Mo Carthon, but he was quite the brick wall when he wanted to be.
Yeah, Maurice Carthon, I'm with you, Sage. I've never seen a better blocking fullback in my years of covering the NFL as well. And obviously, Bill Parcells took such a liking to him. I think they're still probably as close of friends as any of his former players are.
Yeah, he still keeps in touch with them. Yeah.
All right, Sage, you get to pick 2 running backs. Who would you like here?
Well, you got to go with Otis. Anderson. He was MVP of the 25. So, I mean, and everyone just remembers the shiver to Kelso on that drive that, I mean, that, like I said, that drive took forever and wound up with in the end zone. So, he's definitely got to be one of them.
No question. Patty?
I'm on board with Otis. MVP. I mean, just a tremendous runner. He was a load to bring down. Ran all over that Buffalo Bills defense. Got to go with him.
All right. Now, here's the other one that's really hard because I obviously went with Otis Anderson as well. And you're right, Vinny. The 9.5-minute drive in the third quarter where he uppercuts Kelso is one of the more memorable scenes from Super Bowl 25. 14 plays, 75 yards. And what people don't remember is that Otis went in from the 1-yard line and capped off the drive with the touchdown. Parcells made sure that he ended it with the score.
Mm-hmm.
That day, the Giants ran 39 times for 172 yards. I mean, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like the guys on the offensive line in that game, because that's what won the game. I mean, they had, Haas was kind of just managing that game, and they had to run the ball, and they did.
No question. All right. Well, now it gets really tough. Okay. It gets really, really tough when trying to pick the second running back here, because you're talking about names like Joe Morris, Tiki Barber, Brandon Jacobs, and Ahmad Bradshaw. We've only got room for one more on this lineup. So, Sage, where are you going?
Bradshaw.
And why?
Well, I mean, the touchdown he wasn't supposed to score that he scored that won the game 146. He had 72 yards in that game.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing that he scored when he wasn't supposed to?
but still, they won the game, and he had 45 yards in his other game, and I think I thought he's the second running back, just a shade ahead of Jacobs.
Patty?
I can go with that, but I tend to lean a little bit more to Tiki on this one. Tiki was the leading rusher. Now, granted, the yardage total wasn't astronomical, but against the Ravens, the leading rusher, I believe, 11 carries on 49 yards. And I believe he also was the leading receiver in that game. Again, not great stats, and I know that's probably not the game I should be looking at given how bad the offense was, but given that Tiki was so, he was doing it all and he was the leader in those games. So I'm going to give him a slight edge, I think.
This one is so difficult. Barber, of course, was in a Super Bowl that most Giants people would like to forget because they got hammered. I do respect the point, though, Patty. The problem here is that outside of Otis Anderson, none of the Giants running backs in their 5 Super Bowl appearances really had a big statistical game. Yeah. And that's what makes this so hard. Joe Morris, who had a phenomenal season in 1986 and ran for 21 touchdowns, which at the time was an NFL record for halfbacks in one season. Joe did not have a big Super Bowl. He had a flea flicker back to Phil Simms that he threw to McConkey, and McConkey got stopped inside the 5 when they tumbled him. Joe did not have a big Super Bowl. It was all about Phil Simms. And so it's very hard for me to pick Joe Morris. I can't pick Tiki because they got whacked in that game. Brandon Jacobs had the huge 4th down play where he converted it in 42. So do I give it to him for that one play? That was my dilemma, because Jacobs and Bradshaw were in the backfield for the Giants in Super Bowl 42 and Super Bowl 46. So the question is, between those two guys who are like brothers to each other, who do I go with? I finally went to Bradshaw, who in 46 had 17 carries for 72 yards and the 6-yard touchdown on the draw play with 57 seconds to go. that was the final difference in the game. So here's the problem. We now have a split vote. No, we don't. I guess, Vinny, you did take Bradshaw as well?
Yes.
So Bradshaw knocks off Tiki 2-1, and we have a unanimous 3-man vote, or two men and one lady vote for Otis Anderson. So we're going to go Otis Anderson and Ahmad Bradshaw on this. And by the way, as I'm looking at our chats on the right side, we do have Queensboro brother who is going with Richie Seibert at guard. And at the moment, unless we get anybody else, that would break the tie for Richie Seibert at left guard in our all-time New York Giants Super Bowl lineup. Guys, I have kept you long enough tonight. Any thoughts as we wrap this up? Because I will tell you, I spent all morning Sunday, almost 3 hours, going through this. And it was so much fun, especially since the Giants, bless you, especially since the Giants have not been very good over the last decade. And, you know, these last few seasons have been rough. Just to relive so many of these memories was so much fun for me. I probably had as much fun doing this as I have the last 2 seasons combined.
Yeah, this is great. I really enjoyed this.
Well, like I told you before, I said, I was on that 100 best 100 players panel, as Bob Papa called it, the blue ribbon panel.
There you go.
Pick the 100 top players. And, when you're doing that, you got like 5 to 10 years of play, even more to judge this on. Here you have like 30 minutes to judge on the players. I mean, this was really, I think, was a little harder to do than actually getting the 100 players. But it was very interesting to go back and look at some of the stuff that happened, and some of the stuff oh man, I forgot that, and so yeah, it was fun. It was fun in that sense.
Well, I was so glad to have both of you along for the ride, because both of you, between the two of you, over 50 years of Giants football. I've got over 40 years of Giants football. So I guess all three of us are pretty old, aren't we?
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, this was a really fun exercise. You know, Patty, when I first contacted the Sage and I asked him about doing this thing, I asked him, what do you think about picking a coach? And we both agreed, you know what?
Yeah.
You can't pick between the two and Bill and Tom Coughlin. It's just too hard.
That would be a dead heat.
Yeah.
That would be a dead heat. But we didn't do quarterback. Are we doing quarterback or no?
You know what? I forgot.
I was going to say, I know you were saving it for last.
Well, good night.
Of course I had to save the quarterback for last, and I'm ready to wrap it up with you guys. One of you should have
this should be fairly easy, I would think.
Quarterback.
I would think this is going to be easy, but
here we go. Patty, ladies first, for the most important position on the field. Who is the Giants' all-time Super Bowl quarterback?
Oh, gosh. I think everybody who follows me knows that I am a big, big Eli Manning fan. Very appreciative of what he has done. 2 Super Bowl victories, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. But Phil Simms, record-setting Super Bowl performance. You know, that week everybody was talking John Elway this, John Elway that. And the golden-haired one that had the golden game was Phil Simms. That record, I believe, still stands to this day. I got to give him a slight edge over Eli Manning and the 2 Super Bowls and MVPs. And I love Eli. You guys know I do. But Simms with that record, I mean, how do you not give it to him?
Okay, Sage, 22 out of 25, 3 touchdowns. What was it, 268 yards? I seem to forget over the years.
Yeah. 150.9 passing rating out of 158.3.
The greatest individual Super Bowl stat line that any
he had as many touchdown passes as incompletions. And I believe Stacey Robinson had a drop in that game. So technically he could have been 23 out of 25.
You know, Sage, I'm going to stop you. The 3 incompletions, the targets were Mark Bavaro, Stacey Robinson, and Phil McConkey. Robinson had a ball that he deflected and couldn't hold on to. McConkey was interfered with, and so was Bavaro. You could have had either holding in the secondary or interference on both of those plays. Sims could have had a perfect Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I know a lot of fans nowadays probably weren't even alive to see that. I mean, but I was there and I saw that, and it was just mind-boggling to watch this guy. He was, I think, 10 for 10 in the second half when they pulled away. And then he hits the flea flicker to McConkey. He has the one bounce off Bavaro to McConkey for a touchdown. Everything went right. And I remember him saying that, they had practiced the first week in New Jersey, and it was cold and the ball was hard. And then he got out to California, and the ball seemed much softer. And he told Benson, I think it was Benson and maybe it was Oates on the way to the game. He says, I think I'm going to have a big game today. I can just feel it. And, and he certainly did. And, Eli certainly, that's when we talked. I said, it's hard to pick between these two guys because Eli led two scoring drives at the end of the game to win Super Bowls and won 2 MVPs. But, Sims's game was just remarkable. And then he was the first guy to get to go to Disneyland too. So, I have to go with Phil. And I wish we could put both of them in, really, because, these are two really deserving players.
Wide receiver and quarterback, right? Would you guys agree those would probably be the two toughest positions to pick?
Well, with most candidate, yeah, right.
Yeah.
You could give Haas a vote for, I think he was a steady Tommy DeVito third quarterback in that thing also. He played well in that game and, didn't cost him, but, obviously Sims or Manning has to get the nod, and I go with Sims.
Sage, when we talked about this a week ago, and I said to you, I'm going to try to establish parameters for how many people we can pick at each position. And you said, well, you got to have 2 quarterbacks. And I said, no, we can only have 1 quarterback. You can't have 2. All right. That's not a scheme thing. And I said, I know you're going to go with Sims, and I'm probably going to wind up going with Eli because of the 2 Super Bowl MVPs. It's so hard not to go there. Well, on Sunday morning, when I sat down and I finally circled the guys on my ballot, I went with Phil Sims. I could not resist the greatest Super Bowl passing line in the history of the game. I could not do it.
You got to. No disrespect to Eli. I love Eli.
Like I said, I wish we could put them both on, but
yeah.
They both are very deserving. There's no question. But having watched that game and just marveled at the way Sims was just hitting people after person, even had a 22-yard run in that game to set up the last touchdown. So, he just had a remarkable game, and I don't think you can, forget that.
George Martin told me for my book, he said, we were joking about it on the bus, how Phil was still completing passes well after that game ended. That's how amazed they were and how, impressive that performance was. So, Phil's got to be the guy, and again, no disrespect to Eli, who I absolutely love and appreciate, and the 2 MVPs. And I know we went against, the mighty New England Patriots and all that stuff, but Phil was on fire that day.
Yeah, truly, as far as, go ahead, Spinny.
No, I was just going to say, what's funny is the Super Bowls the Giants won. They beat John Elway, a Hall of Fame quarterback. Then they beat Jim Kelly, Hall of Fame quarterback. And twice they beat Brady, who's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. And the game they lost to Trent Dilfer.
Wow. Everything that could have gone wrong in that game did, unfortunately.
I'm saying, they beat 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks and lost to a guy.
Yeah.
Well, now let me ask you something, Sage. While we have you on here, and I've already kind of said my goodbyes, but we kept you on because I screwed up and forgot to name the quarterback. So now that I have you for this extra piece of time, let me ask you, you were on the Hall of Fame balloting committee for a number of years. You were
Yeah, 12 years.
very instrumental in getting guys like Harry Carson and Lawrence Taylor to get into the Hall of Fame. What would be your take if you were still on the committee and were asked to vote on Eli Manning's candidacy this week?
That's a tough one. I mean, you can't ignore what he did in the Super Bowls. You can't ignore that. 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. There were other quarterbacks in there who didn't do that. But his overall record, he may not be a first-time, inductee, but I think eventually he will get in. That's what happens in these meetings. Guy comes in and first time, maybe not. Then the second time, and then eventually, if you keep getting pounded over the head with a guy, time and time again, you vote for him. So I think Eli will eventually get in. I don't know if it's going to be this year. I mean, it could be, but I don't know that, because it took me like 6 years to get Harry in because there was this. I don't want to say anything about the committee, but anyway, it takes a while sometimes to get these guys in who are not the Joe Montanas and the Jerry Rices and the Lawrence Taylors and the obvious first time voters.
Well, I'll say it for you, Sage. There's a lot of anti-New York bias around the nation, where they think that in New York, if you do well, there's a lot of hype.
I didn't want to say that, but
I said it for you.
But anyway, that I think that's what's I think he'll get in, but it may be not the first vote.
You do believe that the first time on the ballot is like in baseball? They say it's very significant for a first-time guy to get in.
It
I
is.
never thought that a first-time guy in football carried that much weight, but a lot of people have said in recent weeks that it does, and that because Peyton Manning was a first-time ballot guy, Eli can't be because he was not Peyton.
Well, I mean, that's one way to look at it, but it is, like I say, there are certain guys who show up and you say, well, Jerry Rice is eligible for the Hall of Fame. Okay, he's in. Joe Montana, Emmitt Smith, those guys, Elway, Marino, those guys, you don't even have to discuss them. There's a discussion that goes on for hours in that meeting room. But some guys you don't have to discuss. Eli would have to be discussed. And, sometimes that, takes a couple of times to get him in. But I think he'll eventually get in. 2 Super Bowl MVPs. Super Bowl MVPs is hard to ignore. It really is.
Yeah.
Like, so although we just ignored him and put Sims.
Well, hey, Sage, and I don't want to put you on the spot here. In fact, I won't do it. But Phil Simms finished up with 199 career touchdown passes. Remember, Mark Jackson dropped what would have been his 200th career touchdown pass in the last regular season game, 1993, against Dallas at home. He dropped wide open left side of the field at the 5-yard line. He doesn't drop that pass. He goes in. The Giants win. They get a bye. They may have knocked off San Francisco if they didn't have to play the wild card game at home and then go out west. I don't know. I know Ricky Waters had 5 touchdowns for the 49ers in that game, and that turned out to be the last game that Simms and LT ever played. I still go back to, if Mark Jackson catches that ball and it's number 200 for Simms and they get the bye, maybe, just maybe, Phil Simms is able to direct that team to another Super Bowl appearance, and who knows if that would have had some bearing on his Hall of Fame qualifications.
Phil's never gotten into the room. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, because he won 1 Super Bowl MVP. He led the team most of the year to the 2nd Super Bowl, although he didn't play in the game. But he got them to the brink of the game, and then Haas took over. And then you have a guy like Bob Greasy, who didn't have the passing numbers, obviously, of Simms, but who won 2 Super Bowls. But the second one Earl Morrall in quarterback the Dolphins most of that year, and Greasy got healthy at the end and came in and win the game. So sometimes it's. I think Phil should be a candidate, but just never got into the room.
Patty, any quick thoughts from you on Eli and Phil Simms before we say goodnight?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know how I feel about Eli. I think, he took a lot of garbage over the course of his career. And the Giants, let's be real, they didn't really do him any favors towards the end of his career. But, looking at it objectively, taking emotion out of it, because I think that's very important to do. Eli was never, I think, I don't believe he was ever a first team All Pro. He never really led the league. He didn't finish as an MVP or a passing yard leaders. I can see that working against him. But that being said, to win the Super Bowl against, twice against the same team, including an undefeated team, to be the MVP, to do what he was able to do, people are going to look at the one loss record, which I think is, not the way to look at it. To consider that how Eli, never missed a game due to injury. These are all factors, little X factors. But I have a feeling, in the eyes of the committee, it's just not going to be enough. It's, because he just doesn't have the accolades as some of these other guys have. But I do think he should be in the Hall of Fame one day. I just don't know if he's going to get in this time. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
You mentioned durability, Patty. Interesting thing, Sage. Everybody knows Phil Simms' first 4 or 5 years of his career, he was beset by injuries until finally Bill Parcells gave him the ball. In between the 83 and 84 seasons, they traded Scott Bruner to Denver, and all of us was it Arizona? I think it was Arizona, and then Phil was the guy, but from 79 up until 84. Phil's career was either beset by injuries or being on the bench. Well, and I wonder if he had played more of those games. I wonder if it would have made a difference because he would have had better cumulative totals.
It might have. But, there's a funny thing about when he broke his hand, when he got it caught in the tape of what was big hands Harrison, the defensive lineman, ripped his thumb off. He was in the hospital. I went to see him. And I said, I guess this is it, Phil, because this was like 3-4 years in a row he'd gotten hurt. He says, oh, no, I'm coming back. And after that, that's when he started working out with the offensive lineman. He started building himself up, building up his body. And then from then on until the foot injury against Buffalo, he never missed a game. I mean, he was determined to get himself into shape so that he could, stay on the field.
Well, it certainly paid off because he is an all-time great, a Giants legend. Finished 11th, by the way, on the Giants Top 100 Blue Ribbon Panel voting, Sage, that you were a part of. How fitting is that he was 11th?
11th, yeah.
Guys,
well, LT was not 56th. I'll say that.
No. I had so many people ask me, do you know who the top 10 are? Do you know how that vote's going to go for the Giants 100? I had a bunch of people asking me about that. And I just kept saying, look, if you can't figure out who number one is, I don't think we need to have this conversation.
Well, First time Bob Papa called me about it, he said, we're going to vote for the top 100. He goes, the top 99 after LT. So, it was, predetermined, but, no question.
Yeah. Oh, Vinny DiTrani, Hall of Fame finalist, media man from the record for so many years. I am so grateful for your friendship and for you to come on this program tonight and participate. Patty Traina, another one of my dear friends. So grateful for you as well to take the time. The Big Giants 50, the book is right there behind you, folks. Look at that. Take a look at that. It's on the wall. It's a great Christmas present. Patty asked Vinny and I, we actually did a little consultation on that sucker, and it was one of the real fun things that we've had to do during our careers. And I hope that this was as fun for you guys as it was for me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was.
Yeah, it brought back a lot of memories too, things that I forgot about. So I enjoyed it. And I hope the listeners enjoyed it as well.
I hope so too, folks. And remember, there'll be an archive of this show up on the Big Blue Breakdown YouTube channel, all part of the New York Giants on SI Media Network. Now, we're going to stay with you. We're going to send Patty and Vinny off. They're going to get some rest. Us old people always do.
Yeah.
And I'm going
Speak for
to get
yourself.
and I'm going to get some rest in a little while after I continue talking to you folks. If you want to have some more comments to chime in on the chat, I'm very, very happy to entertain them. We've also got the login if you want to come in with an audio call or a video call. And I'm going to be with you guys at least until 10 o'clock. I'll go at least another 20 minutes, maybe even longer if you guys want to keep it going. And we'll talk some more Giants football and specifically about the Super Bowl vote if you like. Over in the chat, I did go position by position, and I did fill out what the panel finally voted on. And by the way, guys, before you go, and I'm going to send you off in just a second here, I think I did see, let me just see if I can find it. If there was one more vote breaking the tie on our left guard, did I see one more vote? We were trying to break a tie between William Roberts and Richie Seibert. Kevin Booth had fallen behind in the voting, and I do not see any more votes. So at this point, Richie Seibert from Super Bowl 42 and William Roberts from Super Bowl 25 were both tied. Kevin Booth had fallen behind as we tried to pick an all-time Giants Super Bowl starting left guard. So, folks, if you want to stay with me and see if you can break that tie, Patty, Sage, I appreciate you very much. Thanks for coming on the program tonight.
Thank you, guys. It was great.
Be well.
All right.
All right, folks. Well, this has been a blast. We picked an all-time Giants Super Bowl lineup. We went with 14 players on offense and 14 players on defense, a kicker, a punter, and a kick returner. We had to go with more than 11 on each side of the ball because of scheme changes, where you had a 3-4 or a 4-3. You went with a 3-safety package or you didn't. You went with a 3-wide package or you only went 2 receivers. You went double tight ends. You went 2 running backs. So we expanded it just a tad, gave a little leeway, and went with a total of 31 players on the Giants' all-time Super Bowl lineup. Now, we go with it based on how they did in the Super Bowl. That's why I couldn't vote for Joe Morris, who had a phenomenal 1986 season. One of the best seasons in Giants history by any running back. But his Super Bowl numbers were not spectacular. So again, folks, if any of you want to go to the chat, take a look. All of our guys are there, position by position. We listed them all by the position groups. If you disagree with any of them, that's fine. One guy came on earlier tonight. Let me see. Elo H says, does Jeremy Shockey count? He didn't play in the big game, but was on the roster for Super Bowl 42. Well, Elo H, that's why he doesn't count. This was only about Giants players who participated in their 5 Super Bowls. To get onto this list, you had to play in the Super Bowl itself. It was not about the season that they went to the Super Bowl. It was about the actual Super Bowl games themselves. That's what made this such a fun exercise, because you could have gone a number of different ways depending on the criteria. And I don't ever remember anybody doing something like this, either on a program or, for that matter, in a newspaper or magazine article. You know, the Giants, for their 100th season of pro football, had the blue ribbon panel that Vinny DiTrani was on to name the top 100 players in Giants history. Okay, that's a valid list. It's a great list. I was part of NFL Network and NFL Films' top 10 Giants of all time list. I was one of those panelists, and I was on that. But I just said, you know what? The Giants have been to 5. Count them. Here we go. 5 Super Bowls. Won 4, been to 5. That gives you a really nice ballot to choose from. Let's pick an all-time Giants Super Bowl starting lineup. And so that's what we did tonight. I came up with this idea a couple of weeks ago. I called Patty, I called Vinny, and I said, hey, between the three of us, we've got about 100 combined years of covering the New York Football Giants. If we can't come up with a fun list and pick real reasons why these guys belong on it, then nobody else can. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. All right, so now I got to go back and I got to see if I can catch up with some of these, what do you call it? I got to go back and go to some of your chats. And I got to find out if there's anybody here who's got something that I can talk to about. Because a lot of folks don't want to call in on the audio. I don't know why. A lot of folks don't want to call in on the video. And I get that too. Sometimes people are shy. I'm not shy. I'm Italian. I can't be shy. I was born to be gregarious. All right, let's see what we got here. I want to go back and catch up on some of these folks. Big Blue says he was looking forward to the all-time Giants Super Bowl lineup. We did. Hope you enjoyed it, Big Blue. Also says, go Spags, and hearing Cry Eagles Cry on Sunday night. Big Blue, there are college fight songs for football programs that are meant to spark the fans' interest, the student body's interest, and the alumni's interest in the game, to grab momentum in the stadium and to get those guys going. And yet we have 2 NFL teams in the National Football Conference Eastern Division, Washington and Philadelphia, that actually see a need to basically come up with a college-type fight song. I don't mind telling you, I can't stand either one of them. The Eagles fight song is horrific. The Commanders, formerly known as the Redskins fight song, is horrific. Neither one of them would make the top 1,000,000 of any Billboard chart. That's for sure. Enough said about the musical selections of the NFC East. Christine says, go Spags. Aiden Fink says, don't let Saquon win a Super Bowl. Okay, Isaac Mars says, what's up? What's up, Isaac? How you doing there? All right. Let's keep going down this list and see some of the other folks who have decided that they want. Hey, Big Blue says, Matt Barr, famous quote, this is for the troops. Remember it very well. Iman Perry was really trying to root for Shockey at tight end, says the dude was a menace. I get it, but Shockey had the injured leg in the Super Bowl. You know, he was on crutches, was up in a suite. That's where they put him for safety purposes. And in Super Bowl 42, it was really Kevin Boss who had the 45-yard catch. Let's see, what else do we have here? C. Webb says, good evening. Always good to talk to you, C. Webb. So glad you're on the program again tonight. Hope you had some fun, listening to our historians come up with these selections. Tudo, as always, as I said, Super Chat Tudo. He's always with us, and we appreciate that. He says hi to everybody. Let's see, what else do we have here? We got some people here. Aiden has Scott Young. Big shout out for Phil McConkey. Okay. Everybody loved Phil McConkey. When Joe Morris's flea flicker back to Phil Simms against Denver in Super Bowl 21 went to McConkey, we all thought he was going to make it to the end zone. And then he gets helicopter spun and falls inside the 5-yard line. The dude was crushed. You remember how crushed he was? And then, of course, Bavaro had the Butterfingers in the end zone that allowed Phil to dive and catch a touchdown pass. And then all was right in Phil McConkey's world. How wonderful is that? Christopher Webb says, oh, how about this? Hi, all. He's one of our guys who always calls into the program. He usually does a video call, says, Hope everyone is well. I just had my birthday. Christopher Webb, happy birthday to you, my friend, for sure. And everybody else on the chat is chiming that in as well. Let's see here. The Big Moose says, finally checking in tonight. And that was about an hour and a half ago. So as you can tell, I'm way behind, way behind on getting to some of these chats. But we did what we could to try to go position by position with the Giants' all-time Super Bowl team. Christine says Collins was all over the field. That was in Super Bowl 25 against the Buffalo Bills. He was incredible. Christine says this is awesome as a super chat. Christine, you're awesome for constantly being with us as one of our loyal viewers and listeners to the program. And you even contributed in a super chat. We always appreciate that, and it's awfully kind and generous of you. Iman Perry says, that's why I always question stats. You know, I'm with you, my friend. Stats, they don't tell the whole story. They never do. That's why I tried to tell Patty and Vinny when we talked about this program that there was not going to be any right or wrong answers. And that's what I thought made the program so fun. There's a bunch of people that were unanimous selections, and that's great. I think, maybe almost 3/4 of them were unanimous selections. But people are going to have different reasons that are all viable to pick different guys. And I understand that. And that's what made it fun. The quarterback debate is impossible to sort through. The wide receiver debate, impossible to sort through. It just depends on how you feel at the moment about the criteria that you are going to attach to your selections. Christine says, I heard on BBKL. Yeah, what Christine's talking about there is earlier today on the Giants Big Blue Kickoff Live show, I was on and I presented the question that disqualifying the Tyree helmet catch in Super Bowl 42 and disqualifying the Manning toe tap inside the sideline during the game-winning drive in Super Bowl 46, disqualifying those two, because those are two of the greatest plays in the history of the Super Bowl. So I had to disqualify them. I asked the people on that program today, what is your favorite Super Bowl play of the Giants? Or what is your favorite Giants Super Bowl play? That's a better way to put it, right? And there were so many to choose from. I wound up picking one from each game. And here's what I went with. Super Bowl 21, I went with George Martin's safety in the second quarter of Elway that made it 10-9, Broncos in front. Super Bowl 25, I went with we talked about it earlier, the Everson Walls tackle on Thurman Thomas with about a minute and a half to go in the game near midfield. If Everson Walls does not bring Thurman Thomas down right there, I was in the press box. I saw there wasn't a single solitary defender between Thurman Thomas and the end zone. I know Vinny said he thought it might be a 25 or 35-yard additional piece of yardage for Thomas. I think he was gone. I don't know that any Giant would have caught him from behind unless Thomas just wore out. Remember, he did run for over 100 yards in the game, so perhaps he would have petered out deep in Giants territory. But it certainly would have made Scott Norwood's field goal attempt a chip shot. And with the Giants winning that game 20-19, is there any doubt, for anybody in that building that tackle was not a game saver? So that's where I went for Super Bowl 25. In 35, I went with Ron Dixon's 97-yard kickoff return for a touchdown in the third quarter that made it a 17-7 Ravens lead. And we all know Jermaine Lewis took the ensuing kickoff all the way back for Baltimore, and the route was on. Super Bowl 42, I went with Brandon Jacobs converting the 4th and 1 in Giants territory with about a minute and a half left as part of the game-winning 83-yard touchdown drive that included the Tyree helmet catch. Super Bowl 46, I went with the early fourth quarter interception by Chase Blackburn down at the Giants' 8-yard line on a 50-yard heave from Tom Brady to Gronk. New England was up 17-15 at that point. A completion there means they at least get a field goal and would have taken a 20-15 lead over the Giants. Now, we do know the Giants would eventually come back and get the Ahmad Bradshaw touchdown to win it 21-17. But let's suppose for a second that the Pats didn't have to settle for a field goal. They would have had first and goal at the 8 without Blackburn's defensive play. I got a hunch they probably would have gone into the end zone. It would have been a 24-15 Patriots lead, only a minute into the fourth quarter. The Giants only got the ball back 2 more times in the quarter. Their next possession stalled. Their final possession led to the Bradshaw touchdown with about a minute to go. So it's highly unlikely, in my mind, that the Giants win that game without Blackburn's interception. So those are my 5 favorite plays, one each in the Giants' 5 Super Bowls. If you haven't heard me before, I just finished my 42nd straight season of covering the Giants. So I was at all of these games. And they're all very, very vivid in my memory, which is why it was so fun to do that show this afternoon and to do this show tonight. And I'm so grateful to have had Vinny DiTrani and Patricia Traina on tonight to be able to discuss these things with me. The Big Moo says, now I'm getting old because I remember all of this. The good old days, and the nights weren't bad either. Big Moo, you're speaking the truth. You are speaking the truth. You knew that when Bill Parcells was coach of this team during his tenure from 1983 through the 1990 season, you knew the Giants were always going to have a chance to do something big. In his first year, they were 3-12-1. They had over 24 guys on injured reserve, and it was a mess. But once the playoff run started in 84, he had installed Phil Simms at quarterback and had shipped Scott Bruner out. He went to it, I want to say he went to Arizona. Now, the more I think about it, I think they shipped him to Arizona. Can't remember exactly, though. But I do believe it was Arizona. Anyway, once Simms was installed as the full-time starter before the 84 season, that jump-started the Parcells era. And every year you felt like they were a good bet to make the playoffs and would have an opportunity to play for the Lombardi Trophy. And to be honest, part of me is disappointed they only got 2. And that's because of the strike season in 87 and in 91. Those stoppages, well, not 91, but 91 was the Ray Handley. I don't even want to talk about that. Strike season in 87 ruined 87. And then, of course, after the 90 season, Bill stepped down, gave the team to Ray Handley, and Ray Handley did not do a good job managing the team in 91 and 92. Dan Reeves comes in 93, and that was really the closure of the Parcells era. Dan Reeves was in the driver's seat for the final year of what was the closure of the Bill Parcells era of Giants football in 93, and got the Giants to the playoffs, where they beat the Minnesota Vikings at home, then had to go out to Candlemuck Park in San Francisco. We all know about that muddy field, the pigsty field that it was, the miserable mud and horrible field that it was out there in San Fran. It didn't seem to matter. The Giants were tired. They were beaten up. They had to fly across country, and Ricky Waters scored 5 touchdowns, and they whacked the Giants. And again, that was the end for Phil Simms and for Lawrence Taylor. And that really closed the book on the true Parcells era, so to speak, even though Dan Reeves was driving the ship in that 93 season. So, yeah, I think the Giants could have won at least 1 or 2 more Super Bowls. I know Leonard Marshall has often said to me, I felt we should have had 3 or 4. And I'm seconding that motion right now. It's a shame they only got 2. But it was a hell of a run and very enjoyable to be there for all those plays. Clearly, the Tom Coughlin era was a wonderful era as well. Even when you knew that the team maybe didn't have as good a roster as it needed to have, you felt that Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning, would do something. Michael Strahan was going to be there. They would do something. Tiki Barber was going to be there. They would do something to put themselves into playoff contention and give themselves a chance. And both times they got into the playoffs in 07 and 11. And people didn't think that they'd do all the way. Oh, yeah, they're a playoff team. Good for them. They're a playoff team. They're not going to go to the Super Bowl. And what happened? They went right through and won road game after road game after road game, the Road Warriors. And they got the job done for Coughlin's 2 Super Bowls too. As a whole, the Parcells Giants, as a whole, from 84 to 90, they were better as a whole than the Coughlin Giants. That's true. That's true. From, 2004 to 15. The Parcells Giants as a whole were better and can legitimately say in my mind they could have won 2 more rings. I don't know that Tom's team could have won more than the 2 rings that they won. But anyway, I got on a tangent. I love talking about those teams. Covering those teams meant the world to me and still does. All right, what else do we have here? Oh, I'm so sorry. I accidentally had a typo and spelt Mark Collins' name wrong at 8:33 when I listed the panel's cornerbacks and safeties on the all-time Super Bowl team. I feel bad. Okay, the Big Moo. He did want to agree with Patty on the linebackers, said no brainer. LT was the best defensive player of all time. He changed the game. That game in New Orleans, going back out with the separated shoulder, wow. Primetime game against the New Orleans Saints. Lawrence Taylor was a one-man wrecking crew. With his right shoulder in a harness, he played basically with only his left arm and went out there and dominated. And I mean dominated the New Orleans Saints in one of the most incredible, courageous, gutsy performances that the National Football League has ever seen. Period. End of story. By the greatest defensive player who ever walked on a football field. Oh, Billboard's Builds, one of our regulars, says he forgot about tonight and will have to rewatch. Well, it's all going to be there on the archive, my friend, so don't hesitate. As I go through these chats, folks, just remember, right here at the bottom of the screen, if you want to come in with an audio or a video call, do not hesitate. I'll be very glad to speak with you. Iman Perry says Leonard Marshall was very underrated. Big Moose says, I had the pleasure of meeting Leonard at Starbucks down here in Boca Raton a few times. What a gentleman. Leonard's an awesome dude. Totally awesome dude, for sure. And was the 1985 NFL Defensive Lineman of the Year. Definitely underrated during his time. He was as big a part of those Giants teams during the Parcells era as anybody was. Okay. Let's see. The Big Moo says something, he's messaging Christine, but then says, met LT a few times at a joint of ill repute in North Miami a few times. Can't even talk about that. Okay, we're just going to move right along. I probably should have read that before I popped it up on the screen, right? But then again, we all know LT's extracurricular activities were a little bit off color over the years, right? So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, Andrew Reinhardt mentioned Spider Lockhart. Well, Andrew, here's the problem. I guess you may be referring to him as one of your favorite all-time Giants safeties. Remember, Spider came into the league in the mid to late 60s with the Giants. He was originally a cornerback and a kick returner. Not too many people remember that. They remember he wore number 43. He was very thin, spindly, and wiry, and that's why they nicknamed him Spider. His name was Carl Lockhart, C-A-R-L, like Carl Banks. But Spider played so much bigger than his body. He used to really drop the hammer on people. He hit like a truck. And it's amazing that he didn't get injured more than he did and was so durable over the decade that he played with the Giants. And I know he was one of the top 100 players when the Blue Ribbon panel did the vote this past season. Unfortunately for Spider, he never got to play on really good Giants teams. You know, the 1990 team was 9-5 and missed out on a wild card when they lost to the Rams in the regular season finale, 31-3 at Yankee Stadium. He was on the 1972 team that had Norm Snead at quarterback. Snead went to the Pro Bowl that year. That was the first year he came over in the trade with Minnesota when they sent Frank Tarkington to the Vikings. And unfortunately, the Giants were 8-6 that season. That also was not good enough to make the playoffs. During the dark ages of Giants football, between 1964 and the playoff season of 1981, the Giants only had 2 winning seasons, 1970 and 1972. Now, Lockhart was fortunate enough to be part of those 2 winning seasons, but was never able to taste the playoffs. It was George Martin who, during the 1986 season, Spider Lockhart had died, had come down. I want to say he was stricken with cancer and passed away. And if I have that wrong, I apologize respectfully to his family. But I believe Spider Lockhart came down with cancer and he passed away. And George Martin, who had been a Giants draft choice in 1975 when the Giants played at Shea Stadium, and Spider Lockhart, his last season with the Giants was the 1975 season, and then he retired. So George knew Spider, and to pay tribute to Spider, he went to Giants ownership and suggested that they wear a patch in front of their left shoulder. It was a circle with a spider in it and the number 43 for Carl Spider Lockhart. And that's why every time you see a photo that has that patch, you know that's from the Giants' 1986 Super Bowl 21 championship team. That's the kind of guy George Martin was, one of the all-time most respected players who ever set foot into a Giants locker room. George and Harry Carson were co-captains at the end of their respective careers with the Giants. Andrew, I'm glad you gave me a chance to talk about Spider Lockhart. That warms my heart because as a kid growing up, he was certainly one of my favorite players. Christopher Webb says, R.I.P. Jumbo? No, Chris. That's a mistake. Jumbo Elliott is alive and well. He and I actually communicate very often. We chat quite a bit. No R.I.P. for Jumbo Elliott. That's not true. Jumbo is alive and well. Thank goodness for that. So please, that's a mistake. Let's see what we have here. We have anybody else who chimed in with some stuff? A whole bunch of guys chiming in on some of the other positions that we had. We see here, I also listed on the chat, position by position, the people that we took. Scott Young actually wanted to put Victor Cruz on the team. I couldn't do it. Scott Young wanted to put Plexico Burris on the all-time Giants Super Bowl lineup. I could understand that. That one is actually more deserving than Victor Cruz simply for the Super Bowl production. Okay? Victor Cruz, outstanding Giant. But in the Super Bowl itself, Super Bowl 46, he did catch a touchdown. That is true. Okay? Also had a fumble, but he did catch a touchdown. In fact, Cruz's fumble in Super Bowl 46 was recovered, I believe, by Henry Hynoski as I go back into my memory banks. But you guys can check me on that if you like. What else do we have here? As I go down and down and down and down. Oh, let's see. Imam Perry says, Howard Cross going to get you, Paul. I know. I was voting for Mark Bavaro and Kevin Boss. For those of you who came in late, I had put on my pick, we were allowed 2 tight ends. I went with Mark Bavaro and Kevin Boss for the big 40-plus yard catch he had in Arizona, Super Bowl 42 against the Pats. And I was overruled by Patty and Vinny, who went with Howard Cross and his phenomenal blocking game, as well as catching a handful of passes against the Bills in Super Bowl 25. I get it. It's okay. I again, there's no right or wrong here for any of these things. Okay? Let's see. What else do we have? Oh, the big move. This is not nice. Love Plexico Burris until he cost us another Super Bowl. Dumb guy shoots himself in a nightclub. We would have had another Super Bowl victory. That's the only one of Tom Coughlin's other teams who had a legitimate shot to win it. Most people around that team do believe, and I forgot that before. The big move, I'm glad you brought it up. I did forget that team. The 2012 Giants team was ripping through the league. And then Plexico had the gun incident in New York City. Almost everybody I've ever talked to inside that locker room from 2012 believes that that team was going to repeat and win back-to-back Super Bowls. Big move. I'm glad you brought it up. That is true. Tom Coughlin could have had a 3rd Super Bowl with that team. Allison Canigliero Hubbard says, hi, Paul and Patty. I typed out later. Hi, back to you, Allison. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope all is well out there on the West Coast. Let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, Allison chimes in and says, those were the days. Indeed, they were. It's one of the reasons why I love talking about them so much, because they were phenomenal. They were awesome. Queensboro Brother says, hi, Vinny, Patty, and Paul. I will make sure to tell them that you said hello on the way out. Allison says, Joe, for me, always big Joe Morris fan. But as I explained, Allison, Joe Morris did not have a super-duper Super Bowl in 21. Played okay, but didn't get a lot of chances. That game was all on Phil Simms and his arm. All right. Let's see here. Continuing to look, there were a bunch of people love Brandon Jacobs because of his running and the way he set the tone in Super Bowl 42. I understand that. Okay, let's see. Oh, we got Allison to change her mind. She says, oh, we're talking about Super Bowls. Okay, that's different. OJ and Ahmad or Brandon Jacobs. So now she's backing off of her vote for Joe Morris, and I understand that. Again, Joe's 86 season is one of the all-time great running back seasons in franchise history. But strictly Super Bowl performances, we wound up the threesome. We voted for Otis Anderson and Ahmad Bradshaw. Imam Perry, you're right about this. Jacobs had key blocks on Rodney Harrison on the blitz. Well, you're talking about the touchdown pass at the end of Super Bowl 46 against the Patriots. The 13-yarder to Plexico Burress, that was the difference in the game. Brandon Jacobs read the blitz perfectly. I've talked to him about this over the years, and I went up to him and I said, Brandon, nobody ever talks about it, but you bought Eli about a half a second of time, the way that you picked up that blitz to his right and allowed him to just take his time and softly float that ball in the air. And it seemed like it was up there for about 5 years before it finally came down to Plexico Burress. Boom. Left corner of the end zone over a helpless Ellis Hobbs for a touchdown. And the undefeated season, 19-0, went up in smoke. Indeed. Talked to Plexico about that play many times too, and he really said it felt like slow motion. The ball took forever to get to him. Anyway, but yes, I have talked to Jacob specifically about him picking up the blitz on that play and told him how critical that was to make sure that Eli was not rushed and could make the throw nice and soft and nice and perfect. Just floated it in there. And Jacobs appreciated that. He knows what he did. It was huge. It was huge. All right. What else? Scott Young says, I wish Tiki could get into the Hall of Fame someday. Check his numbers. They're outstanding. Scott, here's what I say about Tiki Barber. I do think he deserves to be strongly considered for the Hall of Fame. His last 3 years with the Giants under Tom Coughlin were as spectacular a 3 years as any running back has ever had in the National Football League. I think what gets held against him, the Giants did make one Super Bowl with him, right? Super Bowl 35. The Ravens defense dominated that game, so that doesn't help Tiki. He did not get a ring and did not have a 100-yard game against Baltimore. So that certainly is going to be held against him. The other things that people will hold against him is that he walked out early. Had he had another season, another 1,000-yard season, he certainly had another year or two left in him. There's no doubt about that. His numbers would have been undeniable. And there's no way that any of the skeptics could have kept him out. He would have kicked in the door. But he had decided enough was enough. And he walked out still at the top of his game. So that's something that skeptics will use to keep the door shut. The other thing is that, if you recall, first few years of his career, he was supposed to be a kick returner and a third down back. And so it wasn't until Jim Fassel, a few years in, decided to make him a full-time halfback. And that's when things started to take off. Now, you could argue that he was so incredibly productive over the final 3 years of his career, Tiki that is, because he did not take abuse and punishment in the first few years of his career. You could make that case. So that's kind of a sticky one to talk about. Because had he become a full-time halfback earlier, he may not have had the 3 spectacular seasons he had at the end of his career. So that's sticky. The one item that I know has justification, his fumbleitis. Wasn't until Tom Coughlin got there that he was able to cure his fumbleitis. Now, there were other great running backs For example, Eric Dickerson. He's in the Hall of Fame. He had fumbleitis. So while it's legit that Tiki did put the ball on the ground too much until his last 3 NFL seasons, and he would admit to that as well, there are some other guys who had fumbleitis who still got into the Hall of Fame anyway. But there is no doubt that he had trouble holding on to the ball. And all coaches will tell you, what are the 2 keys, right? Availability and reliability in terms of ball security. So that's something that is kind of rough when you talk about Tiki, because it wasn't until the end that he really got that straight. Remember, high and tight. Anyway, that's the debate on Tiki. I think he deserves a lot more consideration than what he's gotten, and I certainly would not argue against him being in the Hall. I would love to argue for him. The problem is, I can also understand those who push back. So he is not the slam dunk that I believe Eli Manning should be. But I also got a hunch that those critics on the committee are not going to let Eli Manning be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Okay, let's see what we have here. Steve Jones. Brandon Jacobs hit on Charles Woodson will go down as one of the great runs in the playoffs. Of course, at Lambeau Field. No question. It's like a double-decker bus went right through Woodson's chest. It's one of the great power runs in playoff history. The only thing about this vote that we did, it was only about Super Bowls. So that did not qualify. But Steve, if that's one of the reasons that you're a big Brandon Jacobs fan, thumbs up. I'm with you. Queensboro brother says, I enjoyed this too. I hope he's talking about the program because it was really fun. And I sincerely hope all you guys enjoyed it as well. Christine says, thank you, Patty and Vinny. Allison says, a lot of knowledge here. Oh, my goodness. You consider all the years that were put together on that screen when we had the 3 of us doing this show. Bunch of people screaming for Eli, saying no offense to Phil. A lot of people saying Eli should have been on our final vote. Steve Jones says Manning, but don't sleep on Hostetler. I understand. Allison says, let's make it an Eli week this week. I know. I understand, Allison. Iman Perry chimes back and says, 22 out of 25. Ridiculous. Yeah, it was. Again, when you consider the one kind of tipped bobble drop, and then the other 2 incompletes that should have been flags on the Broncos. I mean, Phil was good enough to be 23 out of 23 that day. Think about that. Okay. Wow. Allison says, that was a great Super Bowl. Dad was there. My grandpa's last year finally got a Super Bowl. I believe she's probably talking about Super Bowl 42, but I'm not sure. Queensboro brother says, Eli went up against the juggernaut of defenses. I understand. Queensboro brother, the problem is Phil had a Super Bowl for the ages that every quarterback who's ever played a game wishes and dreams that they could have had a Super Bowl like that. He doesn't dream about it. He did it. And trust me, I went for a week circling Eli Manning on my ballot. And then I changed it and decided on Sunday morning that I went with Phil Simms. I could not ignore the Herculean performance that he had in 21 that still stands the test of time today. 22 out of 25, 268, and 3 touchdowns. And imagine the pressure that was on him. All of New York, which had not been to a championship game since 1963. Right? Think about that. Since Y.A. Tittle in 1963, Giants had been to the playoffs. And then all of a sudden in 1981, Scott Bruner gets him into the postseason. And then Phil gets him there. Simms gets him there in 84, gets him back in 85. They go to Soldier Field and lose in the wind-blown championship game to the 46 Chicago Bears. And then comes 86. The miraculous 4th and 16 to Bobby Johnson in Minnesota, and Raul Alegre's field goal knocks off the Vikings in the Minneapolis Metrodome. How about the pass over the middle against Denver at Giant Stadium in a game that saw George Martin from his left defensive end position reach up and tip a flare pass by John Elway to himself and rumbling down the sideline all the way for a touchdown until Lawrence Taylor comes and whacks him from behind and tackles him in the end zone. That game wasn't decided until at the end. Phil Simms hit Phil McConkey on a deep throw over the middle. And then once again, wasn't just the Minnesota game, when Raul Alegre kicked the last-second field goal to win it for the Giants. But Alegre did it against the Denver Broncos that year too. Little guy, Raul Alegre, released by the Indianapolis Colts, winds up becoming the most clutch kicker the Giants ever could have imagined in 1986. Those 2 victories helped the Giants achieve what they achieved as they went on and rolled to their first Super Bowl. 1986 season. The Giants won a Lombardi trophy. How many people would have thunk that, huh? If you grew up during the late 60s and early 70s, you had to wonder if you'd ever think that the Giants would make the playoffs. Heck, I remember listening to John Sterling on WMCA 570 AM radio. He had a nightly sports talk show in those days on the weeknights. And I remember the night that the Giants signed Larry Zonka, Hall of Fame fullback, who was coming back from the World Football League after he had played for the Miami Dolphins, went to the World Football League for big money, was coming back to the NFL, and the Giants signed Larry Zonka. And I thought that was going to turn everything around. Of course, I was too young at the time to truly realize that it didn't matter if you had Larry Zonka, because the Giants didn't have an offensive line. It was tissue paper. And so Larry Zonka, who was a bulldozer of a back, he needed some room to operate. And it wasn't going to help Larry Zonka when he got the ball and 3 guys were trying to bring him down behind the line of scrimmage. So guess what? Just signing Larry Zonka did not get the Giants into the playoffs. It would continue to be misery until Scott Bruner in 81 got them into the playoffs. And then they stuck it to the Philadelphia Eagles and Wally Henry in the wild card game down at the Vet in Philly. And Rob Carpenter was a bulldozer himself, an undersized fullback who was a halfback, fullback morph, kind of a tweener, if you will, but had the heart, the grit, and the desire of any fullback. Carpenter ran for well over 100 yards in that game and killed the clock at the end as the Giants held on and finally won a postseason game in 1981. And even then, with the Giants making the playoffs, it was only a dream to believe that they could win a Super Bowl. But Bill Parcells, Phil Simms, Harry Carson, George Martin, Leonard Marshall, Joe Morris, I could go on and on. Raul Alegre, they all made it possible. Mark Bavaro, incredible memories. Great stuff. I always love talking about Giants Super Bowls and those teams. All right, let's go. Allison says, you guys are killing me. I get it. 1986, 87 was outstanding, but come on. All right. I get it. I get it. I get it. Queensboro brother says Eli had to work a little harder with a weaker defense. Queensboro brother says also very close between the two. No doubt. Scott Young says, always go at your first love. Super Bowl 21, Phil Simms. Allison says, we're waiting a long time if it isn't this year. I'm sure that's a comment about Eli Manning's possible Hall of Fame vote, or not should say possible vote. It is a vote if he does not get in. By the way, so you folks know, I don't know how many of you folks are still with us. Again, this show was devoted to Giants Super Bowl memories. Vinny DiTrani of the New Jersey Bergen Record, 5-time finalist for the media wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Patricia Traina, author of the Giants Big 50, Moments in Giants History. Those two were on with me, and we discussed an all-time New York Giants Super Bowl lineup. And if you go through the chat over on the right-hand side, you will see position by position. We listed the panel's final votes at each of the positions. But just to catch you up just a little bit, tomorrow on the NFL Honors Show, the Pro Football Hall of Fame will announce its class for 2025. Now, last year, the show started at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It will also start at 9 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. The Hall of Fame announcements came about an hour into the show last year, right around 10 o'clock. So I would believe that the Hall of Fame announcements tomorrow will also be right around 10 o'clock, strictly based on how they did and ran the program last year. I can't tell you 100% for sure because I'm not the producer of the NFL Honors. I'm not working with NFL Network these days, so I can't tell you what time to watch. But I would expect right around 10 o'clock, you'll get the announcement for who's in the Hall of Fame class of 2025. And Allison, next year, just so you know, if Eli does not make it this year on his first ballot, and I do think there's enough of resistance to probably keep him out, next year's quarterbacks, Drew Brees is going to be a first ballot next year. And to be honest with you, Drew Brees is going in. No question. He's going in, and he's going to be first ballot. There is absolutely no question about that. The other quarterbacks who are up next year, who are going to be added to the ballot, will be Phillip Rivers, who I also believe has a legitimate claim to be a Hall of Famer, but don't even think about him ahead of Eli. Eli has 2 Super Bowl MVPs. Phillip Rivers has a big goose egg when it comes to Super Bowls. So I get it. Rivers had a great career. And in some ways, his regular season stuff, I get it, higher than Eli Manning. But the postseason stuff that Manning did puts him in over Phillip Rivers. So it's Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, and the other two quarterbacks who are going to be on the ballot next year are going to be Alex Smith. You remember him with the Niners and the Chiefs, and Matt Schaub, who was with the Patriots and the Houston Texans. Those are the four quarterbacks who are going to be on the ballot next year, added as first-time nominees. Again, Brees is going to make it. I think you got to make Rivers wait, and hopefully you'll take a second quarterback and put Eli in with Drew Brees. Okay. Allison says Eli was a different sort of leader than Peyton Manning, and he was what we needed in New York at the time. No question. Imam Perry says Eli Manning's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm not going to disagree with that whatsoever. Queensboro Brother says maybe Eli should have been a kicker. I'm not sure I understand that one, but okay. He does say laugh out loud. So, okay. Ha ha ha. Okay. Iman Perry says, so neither Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger should be first ballot Hall of Famers either in that case. Well, Ben's got 2 Super Bowls. Eli's got 2 Super Bowls. Phillip Rivers has none. So there is no doubt in my mind that Ben and Eli both deserve to go in before Phillip Rivers goes in if there's not enough room on the ballot to get them all in. Now, Ben's not up yet. Rivers is going to be up next year. Ben lasted a little longer than Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning did in the league. You have to be out of the game for 5 years to be eligible for the Hall of Fame ballot. So Roethlisberger is going to be coming up later on down the road. I would like to believe that Eli Manning gets in before Ben Roethlisberger comes up for the Hall of Fame vote. I'd like to believe that. I think. Let me see here. 2026. Let me see. You're going to get, oh, wait a minute. What did I do here? 2027 I need. I gave you 2026. Class of 2026 already. 2027. Here we go. Ben Roethlisberger is up first time on the ballot in 2027. So is quarterback Cam Newton, who primarily played for the Carolina Panthers and did go to a Super Bowl. Those are the only 2 quarterbacks who will be first-time ballot members in 2027. So you have Eli up now. Rivers comes up in 26. Ben Roethlisberger comes up in 27. Those were the 3 guys from the same quarterback class, same draft class, and because of their retirement dates, they're staggered. Eli this year, Rivers next year, Ben Roethlisberger in 2027. Okay? All right, let's see. Allison says it's dinner time. Mike was trying to get me off this, and he says hi to both. I love that. Well, hello, Allison and Michael. Thank you for stopping by the program today. Sean Jackson says, Paul, Patty, Vinny, Eli deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but unfortunately the NFL powers that be will probably keep him from being first ballot. Sean, I agree with you. I expect that that's going to be the case. I've heard too many naysayers to make me believe he will get the 40 of the necessary 40 of the 50 votes to get in. Aiden Fink says, I'm nervous about Eli not getting in because of the doubters. Paul, what's the rules in terms of how many guys can be inducted? Because I've noticed that some years have more than others. Okay, Aiden, here's the deal. There are different categories within the Hall of Fame class. Eli Manning is part of the modern day players, which means that you had to be retired for 5 years and you're allowed then to be on the modern day ballot for, I believe, 20 years. I may be wrong. It may be 25, but you can be on the modern day ballot for at least 20 before you get moved to the senior ballot. Okay? So the modern day ballot had 15 players on it when the Hall of Fame committee voted about 3 weeks ago. They knocked it down from 15, I believe, to 8. Once they got it to 8, they now have to vote and get an 80% agreeable vote to put a guy in the Hall of Fame. They can take a maximum of 5 modern day players off of that sub list of this year's class. They also have a coach to vote on. Mike Holmgren was the one who was nominated this year. They also have contributors, front office people, if you will, that also get to be voted on. But in terms of the category where Eli is in, the modern day player, 5 modern day players from that ballot can go in. No more than 5. It was 15 about a month ago. It was to be cut, I believe, down to 8. And then from 8, they were going to cut it down further. Again, no more than 5. I hope that explains it to you. Iman Perry says, great show. Salute. I'm with you, my friend. Let's see. Christine says she loved the show. I appreciate that for sure. Thank you so much. It seemed like a lot of people did like it. We're over 700 people. I mean, even though we got through the actual Giants all-time Super Bowl team and our votes are already in. Again, folks, if you're coming in late, go over to the chat on the side and scroll back up to the beginning, and you'll notice that every once in a while, as we were getting through certain position groups, I posted what our 3-member panel finally decided on. So it's all there. Billboard's Build says, this was great. Brought back lots of memories. No question. Iman Perry says, this was a great way to do it. Super Bowl contributors. Well, that's what we did. This was based simply on how the Giants players did in the 5 Super Bowls that the franchise has been to. Matt Sullivan says, congratulations on your Emmy win. Well, thank you, Matt. And yes, it is true. I did win a New York Emmy Award this past October when the awards came out. I was part of an Eli Manning show episode on Giants.com, and I believe it also ran on MSG, where the special guest was Michael B. Jordan, known as Creed in the movies. And the category was for sports entertainment and interview show. And the talent on that show, it was hosted by Eli Manning. His co-host was Sean O'Hara. And I was the reporter who then conducted a true interview with Michael B. Jordan after he went through a reenactment of the Odell Beckham Jr. one-handed diving catch against Dallas on primetime football. So Eli threw it to him. He reenacted the play. went inside to the locker room, and I did an impromptu interview with Michael B. Jordan as if he was actually in the game. And so, as the third member of the broadcast team in that particular show, that show won an Emmy, and the talent on the show was each presented with one. And so, yes, I did win an Emmy Award. So, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. It's a very proud moment of my 42-plus year career, no doubt. Let's see. Shanita Jackson says Hakeem Nicks was a wide receiver beast during the 2011 Giants Super Bowl run. He sure was. Had the best individual stats for a wide receiver in Giants Super Bowl history in Super Bowl 46. No doubt. Christine says exactly, stats are questionable. Okay, Hakeem Nicks was 10 catches for 109 yards, had 8 first downs, and converted 3 third down opportunities in Super Bowl 46 against the Patriots. No Giants wide receiver has ever put up those kinds of numbers in a Super Bowl. Scott Young says, Paul, I'm just so tired of hearing that the Giants let Saquon go to the Eagles. The media beats on this consistently, but many people don't realize Saquon was a free agent. Saquon chose to go to Philly. That is correct. He decided to go to the highest bidder, a team that had a sensational offensive line and would allow him to do what he does. And that was run for over 2,000 yards. Correct. And Scott, I'm tired of hearing the same stuff myself. But it gets clicks. And that's why a lot of people continue to do it. Remember, it's easy, and I suppose to some people fun, to beat a dead horse. I don't feel that way, but some people obviously do. Craig says, is Jameis Winston, a better option than Fields? Okay, so he's obviously decided that he wants to talk about bridge quarterbacks tonight. Well, I'm going to try to take this sucker to the top of the hour. We have 13 more minutes to go. We came on at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and it's now 10:47. So I'm going to try to go another 13 minutes. My voice is giving out a little bit. So we're going to take it to the top of the hour and then shut it down. But in terms of bridge quarterbacks, Winston's entire career, he has been plagued by turnovers, specifically interceptions. You remember he's the only guy in NFL history who's thrown at least 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in the same season. I don't see any team, honestly, just signing him and even giving him a starting job as a bridge. The turnovers are littered throughout his entire career. It's not like he had 1 or 2 years of them and then he fixed it, or he did it years ago and grew out of it. No, Winston's interceptions have been a problem his entire career. So no, I don't think Jameis Winston a better option than anybody. Can't turn the ball over as much as he does. I'll give you a stat, fellas and ladies. Let me see here. Do I have my piece of paper? Yes, I do. You want to talk about the bridge quarterback for just a second? And you guys know I'm big on this. Here's a new stat that I bet you have not heard anywhere. I don't think anybody, I haven't read it, and I haven't seen it anywhere. But again, I spend so much time thinking about this stuff. I do an awful lot of research and work. Of the pending free agents at quarterback that will be on the market unless somebody decides to sign before free agency starts this year, there are 41 unrestricted I'm sorry, 37. I'm sorry. I forgot that I had crossed out the guys who have already signed for 2025. It was 41. It's now down to 37. Rippon, Greer, Buechele, and Bean have already signed with teams. So the original list of 41 unrestricted free agent quarterbacks available this spring is now down to 37. Of those 37, only 14 have started an NFL playoff game. Okay? Only 6 of the 37 started and were on the winning side in an NFL playoff game. Only 3 of those 37 pending NFL free agent quarterbacks, 3 of 37 have started a Super Bowl. And only 2 of the 37 have actually started and won a Super Bowl. We'll go backwards here just so you have an idea. The 2 that won a Super Bowl were Joe Flacco and Russell Wilson. The 3rd quarterback who started but did not win a Super Bowl is Jimmy Garoppolo. The other 3 quarterbacks who started and won a playoff game, Marcus Mariota, Case Keenum, and Daniel Jones. Then there are 8 other quarterbacks who started a playoff game and lost. Sam Darnold, Andy Dalton, 0 for 4, Mac Jones, Mason Rudolph, Tyler Heineke, Carson Wentz, Teddy Bridgewater, and Tyler Huntley. That's it. The other 23 pending unrestricted free agent quarterbacks available this spring did not ever in their NFL careers start a playoff game. Justin Fields, of course, is one of those. Just to give you guys some information, because that's what I do. All right. Christine says, not great options for bridge quarterbacks. Christine, that is why when you consider all of the factors, including experience, winning experience, age, and situation in terms of being driven and having an opportunity to resuscitate or rebound like what Sam Darnold did with Minnesota this year, it is quite clear to me that Jimmy Garoppolo is the best choice. It's really not even close in my mind if you're looking for a bridge quarterback. All right, Scott Young says, I miss the Bill Parcells, Tom Coughlin days. Let's hope we can turn this thing around here soon. He says, I remember that playoff push back in the day with Scott Brunner. That's 1981, Scott. I was a kid, so excited to see my Giants go into Philly and beat them. That was the start of the Giants turning everything around. He says, back in the days, I used to travel down from Connecticut to the Giants games and always went to LT's restaurant. Anybody remember that? When I was working for the old WNEW radio, I was producing the Giants pregame and postgame radio shows. Bob Papa was our host. And there were a couple of years there, we did the show live from LT's on Route 17 South. Absolutely, I remember it. Christine says, awesome show. Thank you so much. And she says, good night. And that was at 10:07. It's already 10:54. So she's long gone. Sleeping in a deep sleep. Sean Jackson says, Paul, I agree with you. Parcells Giants should have won more than 2 Super Bowls. But Coughlin and Eli's Giants should have won at least 3. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Oh, what did I say before? Did I say 2012? I meant 2008, of course. Plexico with the gun in his sweatpants. Yeah, 2008. If I said 12 before, I was just a little bit tired and maybe slipped. Yes, absolutely, Sean. Coughlin's Giants should have won 3. You mentioned Steve Smith's crucial fourth quarter first down in Super Bowl 42 was very underrated. There's no doubt. Giants Carb Crush says Tiki's pass pro was fantastic. He got really good at it. Early in his career, he was not very good at it. He got really good at it. Again, as the years went on, Tiki became better and better in every facet of the game. That's a guy who worked his butt off to become a true all-star. Sean says Justin Tuck was a major X factor in Super Bowl 42 and 46. Ask Tom Brady and the rest of those Patriots about Justin Tuck. Well, he did make our all-star lineup. Connor Welp says, have a great night, Paul. Love these. Well, I'm glad. Thank you so much. Aiden Fink says, love this show tonight. Hopefully we'll be talking a lot more about Giants Super Bowls before long. Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. Absolutely. I hope that's the case too. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun talking about Super Bowls and Super Bowl plays than it is talking about what free agent bridge quarterback you have to go get. You know, what should the team draft at 3? Should they trade down? Should they get a developmental guy? Should they get somebody they can play right away? That stuff is nothing but a headache. Much rather talk about fun stuff, good stuff, instead of having an off season where there's all this consternation and all this debate when nobody's right or wrong. I posted this earlier tonight. Nobody is right or wrong with how the Giants go about building this team in the next 3 months. Hindsight is the only thing that's right. As long as you're realistic and have logic about the plan that you take, it's right. And there could be several of those roads, just like a fork has 4 prongs on it. Every prong could be right, in a matter of speaking. That's a separate question. How you go about things, you get graded on that. But then you also get graded a second time on the results. Sometimes the plan is really good, and you can get an A for your plan. I mean, does anybody really not believe that Saquon Barkley is worth the number 2 overall pick in a draft? Look what this guy's done. He is a generational talent. He was touched by Hall of Fame jacket caliber football gods. You're seeing it now. That's how great this guy is. He should be the MVP this year. All right? And if he's not, because they got to give it to a quarterback, because all quarterbacks touch the ball more, okay, fine. Then give it to the quarterback. Josh Allen would be my MVP then. But make Saquon Barkley Offensive Player of the Year, because he makes that much of a difference. The Philadelphia Eagles aren't coming anywhere near a Super Bowl unless they buy tickets without Saquon Barkley on the field. That is a fact. Period. End of story. Saquon Barkley is the number 1 reason why the Philadelphia Eagles are playing for a Super Bowl this weekend. End of story. And if that does not make him at least Offensive Player of the Year or MVP, something is wrong. Dave Gettleman's plan in taking Saquon Barkley number 2 was correct. And in the ensuing year or two out, they were trying to rebuild their offensive line so that he could do what he's doing now. But it all came to pieces because the guys that they got did not work out. So the plan was good. They got the superstar talent. Yes, Aiden, I know. Here, he says, remember what you and John were saying. Don't use the term generational talent. I don't care. The truth is, the super duper star, he was there for the taking, and they took him because it was the right thing to do. They had a plan in place to enhance the offensive line over the next 2 years. They had a quarterback in place. They knew what they were going to do. And it all came apart because the offensive line did not play up to expectation. So the plan was good. No problem with the plan, but the results stunk. It's 2 separate grades. You get a grade for the plan. Did it make sense? Were your intentions correct? And then you get a grade for the results, because between the time you execute your plan and the time the results come in, there can be a lot of factors that turn the results sour. And the Giants' offensive line, no matter how many times they tried to change it and swirl guys through the carousel and get better guys in there, it never worked. And Barkley took a pounding and kept getting hurt. If the offensive linemen that they brought in to do the job had done the job that they were supposed to do, then there wouldn't be so many people slamming that pick over the years. Because then Barkley would have had multiple superstar seasons for the Giants, and things would have worked out a whole lot better. That's the problem, folks. The plan was good. The results were not good. Because stuff happened in the middle, in between. Anyway, my thanks to my guests tonight. Vinny DiTrani of The Record and Patricia Traina from the Giants Big 50. As we went through tonight, the all-time Giants Super Bowl lineup. Again, go scroll through the chats on the right-hand part of your screen, and you will see position by position how we voted and the guys that we picked for the all-time New York Giants Super Bowl lineup. It was an awful lot of fun. We'll be back with the Big Blue Breakdown live next Wednesday with another live show, another theme show. I got a couple ideas in mind, but I haven't squared it away yet. And we hope to see you then next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, for another edition of the program as we continue to talk New York Giants football. I don't know if it's going to be as fun as this show was, but I promise you we're certainly going to try. Until then, I'm Paul Dottino. Be well, and thank you for joining us on the Big Blue Breakdown live. So long, everybody.